All right, we're live. So, hello, everybody. Joanna here, and welcome to Why Read episode 18. And I am so excited to have this discussion tonight at a little bit of a later time. But we have here Ben from Books with Benghis Kahn, and we have Kronk, the book guy. And your channel name is The Book Guy, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yes, fantastic. And we always start, well, actually, I already cheated on my own rule, which is to start with the first question, which should be, why read? And so the theme of this show is to ask my guests what is inspiring them to pick up a book right now when there are so many things competing for our attention in this busy world, so many other activities and pastimes that we could be doing. What inspires you to pick up a book? And then from there, we just go into a range of bookish discussions and questions, conversations. So I guess I'll go ahead and start here on my left, which is Ben. Ben, uh, hello, and welcome to
Hey.
Why Read, and why do you read?
Oh man, you'll have to cut me off on this before I go for too long. But there are too many reasons. And I think it's changed throughout my life. And when I was younger, I was definitely just reading for fun. It was one of the many fun activities that I would do in my spare time. And Harry Potter was my beloved series growing up. But I was busy also with school, playing sports, and I was a huge TV and movie watcher. And as I got into college, I considered myself a bit of a cinemaphile, and I was always going to see new movies and old movies that they were playing at the college. And reading definitely took a backseat because I was reading so much for classes. And I think I also just felt like at that point in time during college, after college, that I would become, I was growing up, I'd be serious intellectual, and it was time to leave, childish things behind, and maybe just, dive into serious literary fiction and nonfiction and try to understand the world and humanity and all of its messiness and understand myself and grow and change. And I think reading definitely helped me do that a lot in college and right after, just reading nonfiction about world religions and fictional books too, just giving me new insights into myself and the world around me. And so I think it is an amazing avenue for just reflection and learning new things. But that's kind of changed in terms of why I read more recently as I've settled into more of routine with my work the last bunch of years, living back at home in New Jersey where I'm from. I don't do as much traveling as before. I've lived abroad in multiple places, teaching in Vietnam and on a small island in the Pacific. And so I've had all these tremendous kind of cultural experiences living within very different cultures for long periods of time. And now back at home, when I got back into fantasy and science fiction as an adult, like 5 years ago, it was just like a light had been turned back on in my life, or I opened the door to this room that I left behind years ago that was just so valuable for me. And I've been reading almost nonstop for the past 5 years, just mostly modern fantasy and science fiction. And when you asked me to be on the show and I was starting to really think about why I read or what I get out of it, I think now I'm really seeking transcendent experiences that take me beyond my normal kind of routine life here and the familiar, and just live so many other different lives and go to different places and just feel like I am still learning more about myself and about the world and humanity, but at the same time also having great fun and feeling every kind of emotion that is possible as I go on journeys along with other characters. And I so heavily get immersed in the stories. I feel like I just completely dissociate from myself often when I'm reading, and I'm truly in the mind of the POV characters, and I'm able to really fully visualize scenes around me. And so I love the immersion that reading fiction provides. And especially recently, I've been doing a lot of immersive reading with audiobooks too. So hearing the storytelling out loud and reading at the same time, I'm almost completely lost in these worlds and immersed in other places. And so I like traveling in general. And so if I'm here in New Jersey, I get to travel to all different places through reading. And just I so value new experiences and discovering new things. And reading fiction is what allows me to do that every day from my room here. And it's just, I feel like I couldn't live without it right now. But I hope also to not leave behind some of the reasons I had for reading earlier in my life. But now it feels like I'm just along for all of these spectacular adventures, and and going on these emotional roller coasters that I just tend to not be able to feel the same way through short TV shows or films. There's something about long novels and long series that can take you on that journey for months and months at a time, or maybe years. And so it's just very special to become attached to the characters, to see these grand plots unfold that brilliant creative authors have put down on paper. I just love seeing the creativity at work. It's why I really love fantasy and sci-fi, especially these days.
Wow.
And yeah, so like I said, I could probably go on and on, but I'll stop there.
Yeah, no, I love what you're saying too. And I think that it's interesting because I was watching a video over on Philip Chase's channel the other day, and he was talking to, he used to teach a fantasy literature course at the college level. And he was talking to another booktuber who teaches fantasy to high school students. And she was talking about how I'm paraphrasing, but basically how a lot of teenagers that she works with, it seems like they're questioning the meaning of life for themselves. And it's kind of hard for me to go back that far, but I'm like, oh yeah, I guess, teenagehood, there is, room for like having an existential kind of crisis or being able to question the meaning of things. And books really help them identify that and identify meaning in their lives. And I think that's why so many of us fall in love with literature when we're teenagers or younger. And for whatever reason, many of us do kind of go through a phase, not everybody, but some of us do go through a phase where we're not reading fiction so much. And then we get back into it as adults. And so I guess that's also the part of why I think the why read question is wonderful, because I mean, why do we take a break from literature? Why do we go through those breaks? I think it's because maybe we forget what literature can do, what it really does for us, as you beautifully explained, Ben. So yeah, so Kronk, the book guy, how would how would you like to answer that?
Is that what you want to go by
Yeah,
the way,
how do
in this
you
discussion?
want to go by in this discussion?
Either one. You can go Kronk or the book guy. I don't mind. It just felt weird to not put a name there. That's all. But I'll actually follow on from what you were saying, Joanna. Actually, I've already forgot my point. That was a great start. Yeah.
No, go ahead. Any way you want to answer. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right. You were saying we often move away from reading altogether, and I completely agree. I think there are. It's so easy to turn reading into a type of job, or into a task you have to do. Like it's work, and I think cultivating a positive attitude about reading is one of the most effective ways to actually continue to read. It's one of the problems I think we have in. Let's just say like a Western education system is we often are told, oh, you got to read this book so you can do an assignment. And so we associate reading with someone else picked the book. We have to read for our own betterment. And then we have to do a task associated with it, instead of just reading for the pure joy and the curiosity of it. Yeah, and I think so many people associate reading with how they experienced it in school, where it's boring, and you have to read something that you would not pick for yourself. Yeah, and that lingers with us into adulthood. Absolutely.
Yes. Oh, I totally 100% agree. And not only with the fact that you don't get to choose what you read most of the time, and that a lot of it tends to be older and maybe harder for modern teenagers to connect to, but what students are generally asked to do with it, at least in school systems that I'm familiar with, here in the USA, it's almost fully now, and I work in academic tutoring, so I work with students that are doing these high school and middle school assignments all the time. It's almost fully about analyzing prose or poetry, but mainly fiction, for literary devices and techniques, and almost just in the service of building formulaic kind of 5-paragraph essays where you point out, you create some sort of thesis that the author is, pointing towards a theme through these 3 literary devices, and then you pull out 1 or 2 quotes that illustrate each literary device. And I find when I read for fun, I don't necessarily try to do this, but when I'm most thrilled in my reading, my analytical brain is turned off. I'm not searching out for themes and literary devices and techniques and thinking about, particular symbols and how they're working and being so analytical about it. I think just using fiction as this tool for analysis, I also turns off so many young people from fiction. And, it's just, I do think that's a shame. And I'm not sure really like how the ideal way to read literature in schools. I haven't figured that out, but however it's being done now does not seem to inculcate that love of reading.
Interesting. Yeah. And actually, something I really appreciate about both your channels is that you two both started your channels being pretty well read in fantasy and other genres. I know for you, Ben, I don't know as much about. I know that Kronk, that you are very well read in fantasy, clearly, and neither of you ever talk down to your audiences. You always seem to talk in a language that is uplifting, that is like about the enjoyment of the book. And actually, that's something, Kronk, I was going to ask you about, because you actually have a channel mission, which is to help viewers find their next best fantasy book, even if it's a fantasy read or series that you didn't personally love, like Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think I always get frustrated when people want to sort of always throw books into a good pile and a bad pile. And I just think it's too simple. Like, there's such a spectrum. And in the same way that every human being is unique, every book is unique. And well, actually, going off that metaphor with human beings. So like, I don't like every human being I meet, right? Some people are really into sports, and so I just don't like them, right? It's just automatic. But that doesn't mean that they're a bad person just because their personality doesn't mesh with mine naturally, And I think books are like that. There are so many books out there that may not fit me, but they could fit anyone, and that doesn't automatically mean they're bad. And it's unfair of me to say, oh, well, my opinion and my experience is facts, right? Because it's art. It's always going to be art, and everyone's going to relate to it in different ways. And so I think it's more important to just like open the floodgates and just create an environment where people can enjoy what they enjoy to the level that they naturally enjoy it. I mean, here's another example. Sorry, my cat's zooming around.
Right.
So one of the examples, I want to do a video on this one, but I'll just say it now, is we often think that the level that we enjoy art is directly in proportion to how good it actually is. And it's very different. So I watch a lot of horror films that are awful, right? They are just objectionably awful, but they're kind of fun in a twisted way. And it's the same reason why we sometimes watch a bad film, because it's just so enjoyable to just kind of laugh at it and not take it seriously. And I think it's important to distinguish the difference between whether we enjoyed it or not, or whether it's good or not. I mean, one of my clear examples, that film Logan, like the last Wolverine movie. Like, it's a brilliant film, and I very much did not enjoy it at all. And I'm aware that like it's critically reviewed, it's got great ratings by everyone, and I'm in a minority. So I can at least appreciate, hey, I didn't enjoy it, but it's still a good film, and so I'm not going to mock that. And I think books are just like that in the same way. We got to let people have their own experience, and I guess not be so insecure if our experience is different to everyone else's.
It's hard though. It's so hard. No matter
very hard,
no matter how much I can intellectually tell myself that my experience of a piece of art is utterly subjective and based on my own expectations and what I was hoping to get out of it and standards that I apply through my own history with this medium too. No matter how much I can tell myself that, I think there's still a part of me that if I just utterly connect to a book, or if I just couldn't connect to it at all, that I think there's a small part that still kind of wants to think of it as almost objectively lower quality or objectively higher quality. And if someone doesn't agree that they just didn't see it, or they didn't fully understand what I
or they
did,
read it wrong.
it's so hard to let that go, even though
Yeah.
intellectually I can feel so much that it is subjective, but I do have trouble just fully accepting that all the time. And if people don't love a book that I did, it is tough, and I do feel that a bit personally.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's so many variables that are going to go into whether we connect with a book or not, too. I know, for example, Fantasy Awash mentioned here that sometimes it's just timing. That's an important factor. Sometimes it's our mood. Sometimes it's dependent on the book that we read right before, the book we had right after. Expectations are a huge thing, what we're expecting the book to deliver, or what we think of as the standard of, like, this is what fantasy should be. And then we read a different kind of fantasy book, because the fantasy genre, as we know, has so many different subgenres. It's has so much variation. So it seems like, there's a lot to consider when it comes to that.
Is there objective quality? I just want to pose that question. I don't know if anyone's read Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
I have, yes.
If you haven't, book guy, it was an incredible, but one of the best reads of my life. I read it in those formative late teenage years, and it is a strange kind of nonfiction book, kind of like a fictional narrative as well.
Yeah.
But there's a part where there's this writing professor who has almost a mental breakdown because he can't figure out, like, if there is objective quality in writing or if there's not, or in art in general. And there's this big philosophical exploration of it, because if you bring up certain examples, like, if you go to a fourth grade band performance at elementary school, and you compare it to like the Beatles in their prime, doing a live show, it's like you feel intuitively that there's objectively higher quality over here with the Beatles than with the beginners kids band, and the trying to define it is so messy, and so that was explored in that book in a really interesting way. But like, there is this feeling I have, like, there is some sense of in certain mediums of art, what is objective quality. And I think a lot of people end up also even recognizing the subjectivity of art, seeing certain virtuosos and just everyone kind of agreeing that they're one of the best performers of their instrument or of their style of singing. And so it's interesting. I think with music, maybe there's more consensus around that than with writing. But yeah, it is something that's interesting to ponder.
That's a really good point there. I like the musical comparison. So I'm just curious. So Joanna, you did classical music. That was your background for a while.
Yeah.
And I've seen on your channel you often used an opera as an example in one of them.
Yes. In the first Law series.
In the first
video,
Law one, yes. Yeah. So I was going to say you would know. So I've got a bit of a background in music myself.
I could tell, and you're very talented. Yes.
Oh, right. Yeah, because I've got the whole guitar thing.
That was amazing when you did the guitar and piano for the Game of Thrones theme. Oh, yeah.
Oh, thank you. Yes, you can tell that I can play my instruments, but I don't record them very well. Yes, that was a new experience. But I was going to say, I think when you tell me what your experience is, Joanna. But I know that when you know music really well, I sometimes listen to songs on the radio, and I'm like, why is this popular? It was a 3-chord song, and the melody was just the same 3 notes up and down. Like, that was so basic, and everyone's like, it means so much to me. I'm like, but why?
Oh, I used to do that all the time. I would torture myself. Like, sometimes I would just see what was popular at the time, and I'd think, why? Why are people loving this? And I would keep listening and keep trying. And I have to tell you that I used to be, so this is interesting because of my music background. I feel like there's kind of a journey with that too when you study music, because I think when you start learning things, I know for a while there I started to get, like, at first you kind of are an open slate, right? And you're learning things, And then after a while, once you get a more refined ear and you like hone in on your skills more and you listen to a lot of really, really good musicians, you start to develop, or for me, maybe I'm just talking about my experience. I started to develop a little bit of snobbery with my ear. And I
Oh
would
yeah,
just,
yeah.
like, and not to say that I, like you said about football, like I'm the same way. I'm like, there are certain things I just won't ever click with personally, And so, like, for example, I just can't get into country music. I just can't. But I did get to a point where after studying music for so many years and learning from some really great people, that I could find things to appreciate in everything. So I could honestly listen to a piece of music that the initial part of my brain might say trash and sit there and look more deeply and find things to appreciate and
Yeah.
find I can do that. I've gotten really good at that skill. I've had to because I
Mm.
teach music too. And it's
Oh,
really important
lovely.
to meet people where they are and see what their strengths are and help to build them from that.
Mm.
So I think that's really important to me. And so when it comes to literature, I try really hard to do that. And I think that's a skill. So there have been some books, for example, let's see, what's a popular book I did not love? Fight Club. I read Fight
Oh
Club
yeah,
last
yeah.
year, and I did not like it at all. Like, I just did not resonate with the themes.
Yeah.
I did not It just brought me back to a time in pop culture that I really don't like. Like, it's like fingernails
Mm.
on the chalkboard for me. At the same time, there were certain things that the author did that I appreciated. I can't think of them off the top of my head now, but I remember thinking, "Oh, that was really clever." And what he did with the birthday cake, I can see how he was using that to illustrate that. So I could find things to appreciate, and I could understand how people would love that book, especially if they've seen the movie and how those 2 complement each other. And that's a
Mm.
skill. I don't feel like that for me with books, that came to me very naturally. That's something I've had to refine and work on. But I'm going to push back on you a little bit, Ben, because I actually find like I'm actually trying right now to
Mhm.
learn about literary techniques, and it's not for gatekeeping or snobbery or anything like that. It's more just to help me understand my own psychological experience with a book. Why is it that this book is creating magic for me? Why is it this book is not working or is fingernails on the chalkboard for me? What is it
Mm.
that the author is doing that's bringing out this experience for me? So, like with the first Lost series video that you saw, Kronk. So I was reading that book and I loved it. I was so entertained. I could have just been entertained and a story. That's all you need.
Yeah.
Just, I mean, Abercrombie is so entertaining, regardless. But then I stopped for a while and I started to try and understand why is this so good? And when I
Mm.
looked at it, it was like music to me. I was like, every character voice, the way he was layering character voice on character voice, even with side characters, it's like a character would come in the room and be kind of insecure and bump into this guy who's kind of mad, and this other person who's kind of like wondering what's happening or questioning this. And there'd just be these little tiny shifts in tone that were happening all at once in progression. And I was like, this is like Verdi. And so that was the way I could make sense of it.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are better literary ways, technique ways to describe that, but I like to do that because I think that that also kind of helps too to explain this is why I think this is good, rather than just this was good and that's fine.
Yeah.
But I don't know, I do like to learn about those things so I can
Mm.
add to the discussion.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. It is so fascinating. Oh, go for it. Go for it.
Oh well, I got just a small point. So remember yours, but I did a literacy degree
Oh,
in uni, and I remember we were reading Pride and Prejudice, and I went to my what do we call them, lecturer, tutorer, one of those. I went to the teacher, right, and I was like, "Sir, I'm really bored reading this book. I am not enjoying it. Why is it so popular? Why is this considered a classic piece of literature? Like, I don't like it at all." And he said to me, it's this one's really stuck with me. He's like, everything is popular for a reason. And even if it's not a very good reason, or there's not a lot of reasons, there's something of merit in everything. And you've got to find it. and that was because I had to, fulfill the assignment. But it's genuinely stuck with me. Even stuff like, Twilight or 50 Shades of Grey, which is considered like, the worst of the worst. But hey, why are they popular? Clearly, it's connecting with people. There's got to be something good about it, and that's why I don't always jump on the bash the things that are popular, because someone liked it because there was something good about it. It's something that clearly helped it rise to the top for whatever reason.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's beautifully said. Yes.
You
Go
both
ahead,
you
Ben.
both are helping me on my mission that I guess I'm forming now, to try to be more charitable to reads and authors that are not clicking with me, because when I really just want to be immersed in there and along for the ride, and when I'm not able to really get immersed, and I'm noticing things in the prose that are bothering me, or I'm thinking about plot holes, that is just not the kind of enjoyable experience I want with my reading hobby. And so then I get angry at the author in the book about why it's not doing this, or what's wrong with it that it's not. And even a more recent one that just did not click with me at all was the first binding. And I'd seen others that had similar experiences, and I did a buddy read, and it did not go well for either of us. And I sought out some really positive discussions about it on BookTube, and was just amazed. It felt like they had read a different book, but really they had read the same book and just gotten so much out of it that I had not. And it's so fascinating to think about why that might be. So I'm with you, John. It really is worth investigating why books are clicking or not, and then maybe trying to, with books that aren't clicking, maybe early on or in the middle of those, if we're not going to DNF, then, and if we're going to stick it out, like, try not to read against the text. I should tell myself, just figure out, what is this author really trying to do? Even if it's not what I was hoping the read was going to be, like, maybe I'll just try to sit with what this author's whole project was. And the first binding was doing something really ambitious. Like, it was trying to engage with a lot of real world mythology and create a kind of fictional mythology. And some storytellers that we meet along the way tell long kind of in-world myths that are kind of breaks from the main, like, present day narrative. And I was just wanting to skim through those, like, let's get back to the main narrative, let's get back to the story. But that was just fully reading against that text, because I think those chapters were really at the core of what the whole series is trying to do. And I just bring this up because it's a great example, I think, of me reading against the text and not trying to really discover why others might like it or what might be great about it.
And you said something earlier that I definitely resonate with, though, too, Ben, which is that when you're reading, you're not really reading with your analytical brain. Sometimes I find that's important to enjoy a story, like, not read so analytically, just roll with it. And then later
you got to
on,
shut your brain off to enjoy it.
I mean, kind of. I'll give you an example. So I've been reading Janny Wurtz's Wars of Light and Shadow, and I've said this many times. I think Janny Wurtz would not be offended by me saying this so many times, but I've really struggled getting into her prose. It's her more complex prose. She has a range of different prose styles depending on the books she writes. And with that particular series, which, by the way, Kronk, have you read any Janny Wurtz? Maybe I should ask that first.
Oh, well, I've read the one she co-wrote with Raymond Feist.
Daughter of the Empire.
Yes, and that was the best trilogy in the entire Rift 4 cycle. So I've always meant to go and read The War of Light and Shadow. Is that what it's called? War of Light and Shadow?
Yes, Wars of Light and Shadow. Yeah. I haven't read that yet. I have some friends now that are reading that particular trilogy and have so much praise for it. And I understand her prose style might be a little more accessible in that particular trilogy, along with Feist. But in the series I'm reading, it's very descriptive. There are these very, very long introductory phrases before we get to the subject in the sentence.
That taxes your working memory. Just
it does. She loves those long-winded sentences, and it's beautiful. It is really beautifully rich, and it perfectly supports what she's doing in that series, because she's playing with light and shadow and color and magic. It's all interwoven into the magic of the world, and music magic too, which is really cool. But so she has like this elaborate metaphysics that's embodied through that language, through that prose style. And yet at the same time, if I try to read that, like, with my prefrontal cortex, I can't say the word now.
Yeah.
If I try to read it analytically, I just get stuck. But if
Mm.
I switch to, like, the visual part of my brain and just try to visualize what she's saying, then suddenly it comes out. It just makes sense. Like,
Mm.
I don't know. And then later on, I can go back and evaluate and appreciate it on a different level, but it's something I can't overthink, you know? So I don't know. That's just a particular example, but in general, I do find it easier not to overanalyze when I'm reading. And then later on, I can go back and, oh, why did that resonate with me or why that didn't or whatever.
Mm. Well, I'm going to do a slight tangent actually,
Sure, go
because
ahead.
just speaking of Jenny Wirtz. So a few years ago, I saw Raymond Feist in person. He came to Australia. It's actually a really weird thing. If you guys are both American, I'm not sure if you know this, but like the number of books that make it to Australia are very different. It's just like a weird marketing gimmick. So when I was growing up, Raymond Feist was everywhere. Like he was like the ultimate fantasy guy. And it's only when I started reading other books and joining the more international community, I was like, oh my God, he's so low down on the scale.
Oh,
And started
wow.
reading other books. I was like, oh yeah, like literally everything else is better. But I've still got such a love for his work. But when I saw him in person, he was chatting with a crowd of people. And he said when he was co-writing the Daughter of the Empire trilogy, because we're all like, how do you co-write a book? That's got to be tricky. And he said that they basically took turns. They each wrote a chapter and they would, email the chapter to each other. But he said for the second book, he was getting married. So she wrote more of the second book. And then for the third book, she was getting married. So he wrote more of the third book. Did I say that right? That felt
That's fascinating. I didn't know that was
Yeah.
the process they used, but I've been wondering about that, honestly. Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And then when I actually went and read the Empire trilogy, I was like, oh, the second book that she wrote more of is by far the best of the three. I was like,
Wow.
that's telling. That's very telling. So I think like he may be more popular, but I got the sense that she was more skilled as a writer. So I've always had like respect for her and wanted to go on and read more of her works, but it's just never made its way onto my TBR. But I think it will now.
Yay.
One of the really cool things about the modern fantasy and science fiction just whole kind of genre is that the variety of reads that you can get and the variety of prose styles too. I think it's just so fantastic that you could go from reading, a briskly paced John Gwynne or Brandon Sanderson kind of more modern prose style, and then switch over to Steven Erikson, Robin Hobb for slower pace, more elegant writing, or Jenny Wirtz, who I haven't read yet, but I just love that we can experience such a range of writing styles in this same genre and different storytelling styles too. I really love just the range within the genre, because Joe Abercrombie books feel so different from Sanderson and from Erikson and Hobb. And I just love, being able to switch around all these amazing authors and discovering constant stream of new ones too, as I'm starting to just look into more of the lesser known ones and self-pub now and new releases, as I've tried to catch up on a lot of the more famous ones in the last bunch of years. And there's just so much great, new, fresh writing out there and different kinds of stories. I just read Becoming a Druid, and that's just a recent self-pub. And it doesn't have a big readership yet, but I really connected to it. And this is by Mike Mullman, and just as part of the read along I'm doing with the Spiffbo theme, and so I have so many trad pub books and series on my TBR and that I've accumulated, but being able to just experience all these different new authors and different styles and stories is so awesome. It's one of the reasons I love modern SFF so much.
Oh, I totally agree. I totally agree with you. And actually, you brought up a series I wanted to ask both of you about, and that is Malazan. So, Kronk, I know you have a video coming out soon, right? On your Malazan journey. Is that right? That's
yes.
the rumor I heard.
I haven't started typing down the script yet because I've just got so many thoughts.
Yeah. I love your video style. Like, you are doing something that is so fresh for BookTube. Like, I'm not a very creative individual. Like, I joined BookTube and just, am doing the standard kind of wrap ups and book hauls, and that's what I enjoy doing, and the occasional series review. But it is awesome seeing your really scripted long series breakdowns that are non-spoiler and for like a beginner's guide. And you've inspired me because I really want to do the same kind of thing for Shadows of the Apt for Adrian Tchaikovsky, since that's this long 10-book series that does not have a wide readership, but I think so many people might love it, and I loved it so much. And so
Sorry,
I just love what you're doing.
Ryan Pallison. Sorry, there was a comment by Ryan Pallison. That's my brother-in-law. Hey, buddy.
Oh, no way.
Thanks for watching, man. Good.
Sorry about the tangent away from Malazan, but
no, you're okay.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I totally agree too. The format that you use to talk about these series, it's a deep dive, but totally spoiler free, and it's so impressive that you do that. So you do script your videos.
Thank you. Yes. Look, I'm Australian, so I swear a lot. So I have to script. Yes, I'm not even kidding. Like, I've actually been watching my language on the video. I was a bit nervous about this. I was like, oh, I'm going to drop an F-bomb.
It's all good.
It's a coming.
Are there other Australian curses that YouTube wouldn't care about, maybe because they're slang? I don't know. I'd love to hear some someday. But
well, if you talk about insults, drongo is a common one. I mean, it's terrible. No one actually says it. I mean, it's one of those things. Like, there's so much Australian slang. I swear we only use it around foreigners.
Wow,
it's great. Have you guys ever heard of drop bears?
No.
No.
Look, I'm gonna get in trouble with my fellow Australians for this, but
right as. Do they say right as? Is that good slang? Right as.
No,
is that no? I heard it in New Zealand when I visited, but maybe they do. Maybe they have different slang over there.
A little bit. They're our cousins. We have like a sibling rivalry with New Zealand. Yes,
but Malazan is an interesting one to talk about. I don't know if you're about to jump in there, but I read it before starting my channel back when I was just doing my own thing with my reading life, and for almost 6 months a few years ago, I did nothing besides read Malazan books, Stephen Erickson, and switching off with the Ian C. Esselmont novels of the Malazan Empire. And so I was just immersed in that world and series for 6 months. I don't know if that was the wisest decision, but that was quite a journey, because I lost some steam towards the end for sure. But that is definitely unlike anything I've ever read.
I think our journeys overlapped at the end. Like, you were ahead of me, but they kind of overlapped a little bit, if I recall. Like, we were on, because I think before you had a channel, we were interacting on Alan's Discord about that.
Yeah, and I was trying to track the kind of journey that Philip Chase and AP Canavan were also having, where I could see their discussions and they wouldn't be too far removed from my own memories of the book, and that was really fun to see their chats about everything.
So what about you, Kronk? How did you get into Malazan?
Yeah. Oh, well, I'll actually address some elephant in the room. So I know everyone pronounces it. Well, a lot of people pronounce it Malazan, and I know that's how Erickson pronounces it.
But I didn't know. I said Malazan forever, and then I kept hearing people say Malazan, so I switched it.
Well, for me, the emphasis is on the first syllable, Malazan.
Yeah, that sounds better to me. That's what I always thought.
That's how the audiobook pronounces it. Yeah, but the author does Malazan.
Malaz City, like Malaz. He doesn't care, though. He has said he does not care if we butcher his pronunciation.
Oh. Stephen Erickson is like the world's nicest guy.
I met him.
Canadian. Yeah. Oh, you've met him?
Yeah, I met him. I met him at a conference in Orlando last year. Wow. Yeah, so I got to have breakfast with him. It was really fun. I know.
What a name drop.
He's so nice. I know. He's so nice. Nicest person ever. Yeah. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yes, and I finished the series, so I was like, I love your series so much. Anyway, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know. How do you describe it? But anyway, so I'm just going to call it Malazan, but like
no, go ahead.
Yeah. So like I've never seen such intense fans, like, ever. The Malazan fandom is just so passionate, or often to the point of like being competitive and confrontational, though. Like, there's something that I would honestly say that a lot of them take the passion for it just to extremes. And that's okay, but there's a lot of like, oh, people say I don't like Malazan, it was too confusing, and people are like, well, that's because you're dumb, right? Because Malazan's a smart series. I'm like, no, we're not doing that. Not doing that.
Yes, I hate that.
But I've seen a bit of that, unfortunately.
Oh no!
But, oh, hello.
Look who's here.
Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I have my children in there eating, and so I said, I'm gonna stop and make a call. Y'all come get me when you're ready.
So we were just
so
talking about
so nice and sunny there. That's because is it 6:40 for you?
7:40. I'm in Atlanta.
Oh, that's
okay,
right.
okay.
We're like an hour apart right now. Dang.
Yeah.
We were just talking about Malazan or Malazan and how the fandom can get pretty intense, but they got to recognize that Steven Erikson writes in a completely different style from most other modern fantasy, and so it's okay if people don't click with it.
Yeah. I mean, like, every book's not for everybody. Like, getting mad at people because they don't like a book. People always come to me trying to, like, I don't know, wind me up, being like, "Oh, I hated long press." I'm like, okay, like I didn't write it, so it doesn't hurt my feelings. So not liking Malazan, people are like, "Oh, I hate Malazan." It's like, okay, well, like, you're not cool because you hate Malazan. Just like you're not smarter than everybody else because you like it. Like, let people like what they like. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So I mean, I don't get it. So
I know. Same here. Yeah. No, actually, it's funny because I do love the series, but I'm always like so hesitant to recommend it to anybody. I'm just like, maybe you wouldn't. I mean, I've straight up told people that they probably wouldn't like it. Was that your name tag? What was that?
Yeah, I have to wear a name tag with a white name tag to show that I'm a chaperone.
Are they doing Kurtamen or Quiz Bowl? Or
yeah, so it's the national competition. They'll take tests, but the thing that I'm always doing is helping them with the Quiz Bowl stuff. So our first round of that is tomorrow, and I've got kids in all three levels. I've got kids in novice, intermediate, and the advanced team. So it's pretty stressful. I actually don't ever want kids on it because, like, it's much easier when I'm watching kids that aren't mine. Because now, if the Florida team loses and I got kids on my team, it's gonna be my kids' fault.
Is it all just for fun? Is it all just for fun and people are having fun there?
Okay, I'm at the National Junior Classical League convention. This is one of the nerdiest things, like ever.
You're welcome here.
That's
so
true.
anyway,
I did a local Kurtamen when I was in high school. I took high school Latin, and I went to one Quiz Bowl.
You play Kurtamen?
We just did it a couple times, and even the local one, like the least national one there was possible, was pretty intense. I remember it being a little intense.
People take Kurtamen pretty seriously. Anyway, I didn't mean to disrupt y'all's conversation. What were you talking about?
Oh, Kronk was going to tell us about how he got into Malazan or Malazan.
Yes, Kronk. Yeah.
Oh.
Then we can talk about this
enthusiasm. Yes.
Go ahead.
Oh, sounds good. Yeah, no, with Malazan, like, it was always so many people like, oh, if you like the Wheel of Time, you'll like Malazan. And that was the message I kept hearing because, like, they're both really big series, really chunky. And then when the actual reading experience is completely different. And I honestly don't think Malazan and Wheel of Time are comparable, other than the fact that the sheer size of them is similar and their genre is similar, but completely different. And that's okay. But I think it's your expectations can really affect how you perceive a book when you actually sit down to read it. And if you're expecting the Wheel of Time story, like, this is not Wheel of Time. The biggest thing that I think I struggled with initially with Malazan was how many plot lines were going at the same time. And it was really tricky. And I think that was partly because I did the series mostly by Audible. So it's a bit tricky.
You did Malazan on audio?
Yeah. Well,
goodness.
Value for getting the credits, right? Because they're really big books.
Yeah.
And Malazan is just not a very popular series in Australia. So all of the books I would have to purchase online, and that would cost more through shipping. So I did it all by Audible, and then I ended up having to read heaps of online discussions to, like, catch up on everything to make sure I was still comprehending it. But all that said, the multiple plot lines ended up being the thing that I appreciated the most about the series, because I was like, I genuinely cannot fathom how someone has like an 8 plot line book and have them all converge in the final chapter. Like, that's just too good. And that was the kind of thing where I'm just like, I feel like I can't even read this analytically because it's too clever. Like, I just can't comprehend all the little steps that are going on into this that are making the plots work together. So it was hard to get into, but definitely like you could appreciate it once you did all the work. But it is work to comprehend that much.
And if you hear Erickson talking and doing his little chapter analysis videos, or even scene analysis with like AP Canavan, like he's very intentional about like his word choice and just about like individual sentences, and so just like the attention and detail he had writing, you know, millions of words for that series, it blows my mind that it could all be so coherent in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw one person, they commented on my channel and they described Malazan as like a series of very well-written scenes. And I was like, oh, actually, that really sums it up very well, because every scene you're reading, when you're reading it, like, oh, this is really good writing, I'm very invested in it. And then the scene ends, and then you're in a completely different part, and then it's like 20 more scenes before you get back to that character from the scene you really liked. So it is a bit disorientating, but every scene as you're reading it is good.
Yeah, I've heard that before too, that he takes like a short story approach. That's one of the techniques he uses.
I like that.
Yeah.
No,
I mean, it didn't come from me. I didn't automatically think that. But then when somebody said that, I was like, oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Well, one of the great things about BookTube is just like, you know, hearing Alan talk about, you know, a new release. He's always talking about new releases. And so you're great for putting those on my radar. Under like really not the popular new releases. So you're safe. It's not like
and Alan, you're being asked a question here too.
But
I'll answer when Ben's done.
But I diving into BookTube since getting back into fantasy, I feel like so many people, you, Joanna, Alan, Jimmy, just are able to set your expectations really well in a non-spoiler way for, you know, the type of read it is. And so, you know, I often find myself, even if I don't know much about the details of an author series going in, just from the things I've seen on BookTube, just have, you know, appropriate expectations usually for what it is. And so it's, you know, I'm not going into Malazan thinking it's going to be Wheel of Time.
I totally agree. Yeah, I totally agree. All right.
It's not that complicated, Gary. It's like I don't know. Like, I mean, when I read Guards of the Moon, like I don't know. I didn't really get this. Malazan is really difficult chatter. Are you? Hold on. Are you leaving? Practice? Okay. So will we see you guys before Fellowship? I'm so sorry.
Okay.
No.
Yeah.
No, I actually went into Malazan fearing that it was going to be like James Joycean. It's like I picked up Ulysses once when I was younger, and I did not get very far because I was like, I'm not understanding like what I'm reading. I don't understand anything that I'm reading in this James Joyce book.
Ulysses, you should never read it anyway.
Oh yeah, I put it down quickly, but I was worried that Malazan was going to be like that, and so I was pleasantly surprised when I was just able to really grasp just, oh, who are these characters? What are they doing in this present moment? He's really, you know, he's careful about what information he reveals about like past history and motivations. But in terms of just, you know, describing what's happening in the present day scenes, I thought it read pretty clearly and seamlessly, and it wasn't overly complicated in that way.
Like my biggest thing with Guardians of the Moon is I didn't always know what was going on because I didn't understand the terminology. Are y'all done? Okay, give me 1 second. And so, but I played like a ton of JRPGs that throw you in the middle and give you a whole bunch of words that you understand. And I guess I got to figure out what Udu is. I don't know what freaking Udu is, or Utic, or any of these other buzzwords that JRPGs throw at you like a million miles an hour. And so, like, I used the glossary a lot, figuring it out. And books 1 and 2 were the most confusing, just because a lot of times it's written. I mean, it's not written to where sometimes there's just a lot happening. Pratchett does this. Like, Pratchett, at the end of his Discworld books, a lot of times has this really, like, magical, like, confluence? What is it called at the end of Malazan? Convergence. A magical convergence where it starts getting described really abstractly, and I can't follow it because my brain can't track the abstractness of what's going on. So I had a lot of that in the first 2 books of Malazan, and after that it was pretty easy to understand. It's really the first 2 books you just acclimate yourself, I guess. So, and the short story thing, I mean, yeah, one doesn't translate necessarily to another. It's why just because you're a good theater actor doesn't mean you're a good stage actor. But yeah, so that is my thoughts. I don't know. I do see how people can get overwhelmed, and because it doesn't, like, a lot of times I have no idea what it's saying or what was going on in like the Warrens are the hardest thing to understand. The Warrens, the difference between the Warrens and the Holds and the
the cards,
and,
the deck.
And the deck, yeah. I mean, that's the hardest thing to understand. And the fact that he doesn't tell you what a divers and a soul taken is, you just kind of have to figure it out. That like, you know, divers is a bunch of them and soul taken is one. But yeah, like after that, it's pretty okay. Use the glossary. Don't listen to Philip and be like, just flow with it. Let it roll over you. Let the text roll. Like, shut up. Use the glossary. Like, use the freaking glossary if you need it.
I did take notes when I read it, honestly. And I felt like that helped me. I guess everybody's different when it comes to that. Like, some people can just roll with it like Philip, or, you know, are like me and take notes. And some people like to use the Wikipedia and Tor read along things. But I say just go with what feels good and what you resonate with, and it's okay.
Yeah.
Like, for me, I was okay not knowing everything. Like, when I picked up Gardens of the Moon, I didn't know anything about the series. I didn't even know there were 10 books, honestly. But I loved it. I just loved it, even though I didn't know everything that was going on. For me, there was something just so different about the tone and atmosphere, the quirky characters, and I thought that the magic was just surreal. Hairlock? Are you kidding me? And and like,
I know, right in the beginning of book 1 too.
And the female characters too. As a female fantasy reader, that was something I appreciated in an adult fantasy book that went back to the 90s that actually had some pretty solid, interesting female characters. So that was something, not to say that there weren't any books like that at the time or earlier, but I just hadn't come across them yet. So I did appreciate that.
Yeah, right in book 1, you get Tattersail and
the
adjunct, who's
Lorne,
an interesting character.
Yes.
There's so many great characters of all types throughout Malazan, but something that helped me, I think, what's interesting about my reading habits is as they shifted over time, I read almost fully in print just in the years after college, and then I would listen to the occasional audiobook. And when I was abroad, I listened to a few, The Things They Carried, narrated by Bryan Cranston of Breaking Bad.
Ooh.
You know, that book is an amazing book, and he does an amazing narration of it. Like, highly recommend that. And a history of the Beatles too. Tune In was awesome. It was like the history of from their early lives up through like recording their first Beatles album. It was so good. But I'd mostly read in print, and then as I started to get into fantasy, I wanted to just make use of my commuting time to work and other time like going on walks and doing chores. So I started listening to audiobooks, and I did the Dresden Files and just loved that audio journey so much, and then did First Law by audio and loved that so much. I started to love hearing the audio that I almost like couldn't not like listen to the narrator if they were good and miss out on that. And so I almost read everything now hybrid or immersively, where I'm doing some of it in print with the book, and then when I go on a walk, I'll turn it on the audiobook and just continue with it that way, or do it immersively where I'm listening and reading at the same time. And with Malazan, I think that helped me, because if you just do something about audio, like new names and world building, it can be hard to really, you know, get grounded with them. But that's where having the print book really helps. But the audio also helps. Like a narrator like Ralph Lister for the first 3 Malazan books was so incredible, and doing distinct voices for hundreds of different characters. And he brought so much nuance and understanding of the text, it felt like. And so I feel like he added to my understanding of the scenes and of the text, and reading it at the same time also helps with that. So I know that could be a bit of an expensive way to read, is to have audiobook copies of everything and like a physical copy. I try to, you know, hit every Audible sale that I see, or get things from used bookstores or on, you know, discount online shops like Book Outlet here in the US. but it is such an immersive way that I found to read, and did, I think, help my Malazan journey and help me understand everything that was going on, especially early.
Yeah.
You know, people are saying in the comments they love going in blind. And it's just funny because yesterday I went and watched the Barbie movie and I hadn't seen any trailer. Bit of a different example, but honestly, I have stopped watching trailers so that you can just go in as blind as possible. And it's genuinely improving my experience of things. And I'm even trying to not read the synopsis on the back of a book. Like if I'm going to choose a book, I generally just look at the ratings on GOODREADS and like, okay, it seems good enough. Let's just go in blind and just pull the ripcord on that and try not to hear anything more about it. And it's so good because you can just be surprised by everything, even in the earliest chapters.
Yeah. But especially movie trailers give away things up through the climax.
And they really do.
They almost tell the whole mini story of the whole movie in trailers. And I went in blind for Everything Everywhere All at Once and had an incredible experience with that one. And I loved the fact that I had no clue what it was going to be. Even just clues about like the visual style. And yes, I also try to avoid spoilers pretty desperately. I don't look at backs of books ever, and I try not to actually watch too many reviews on BookTube of books I haven't read yet, or if I do, and I'm very careful to stop them or to fast forward if it starts to get even like semi-spoilery, even in a vague way. So I want to know what to expect with the read, but I don't want any of the specific spoilers. So I'm pretty.
Yeah, it's really tricky, isn't it? It's really, really tricky. Yeah. I know a lot of people say they don't watch reviews for that reason because they'd rather go into a book totally blind. But I still think that there's a place for that. Like I definitely have picked up. Well, I've picked up several books thanks to some wonderful spoiler-free reviews. If I'm already set that I'm definitely going to read a book, then I might avoid the review until I'm finished with the book. But yeah, I think that they still have their place. What do you guys think about about reviews?
Yeah, go for it.
Look, honestly, I might be in the minority about this, but I genuinely don't really like reviews that much.
I don't think you're in a minority because they tend to do
apparently I don't
the
do
worst
well
on BookTube.
Yeah. Well, honestly, I try to make my videos as least like a review as possible and more, kind of more of a sales pitch, but without the pushiness of it, you know, because I think, I don't know, everyone's a critic. And I think that's the temptation. Like when we step into the role of a critic, we kind of assume that we know more than everyone else. And I don't know, I think most of the time, if someone's successfully written a book and published it and got it sold, they probably know more than I do, since I have not done that, you know? Yeah.
That's a really interesting insight. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm with you. I've been very hesitant to actually film reviews, and I've mostly done it for just general series that I finished and try to just give more of my overall reaction and be in a non-spoiler way, try to express what, kind of journey you go on with that series. And so I've been like, I want to do more of your type of video where you're just kind of introducing a series for readers who haven't read it yet. And yeah, I enjoy watching reviews for things I've read, and especially if for booktubers I follow, I like to know, how their tastes align with mine. And so seeing their reviews for books can help me calibrate that. But it also brings me new insights about the book that I wouldn't maybe thought about myself. And so I do enjoy that aspect of watching reviews, especially for things that I've read before. And for the non-spoiler reviews, I really like watching them if they're books or authors that are really off my radar that I haven't even heard of yet, or I wouldn't really, reach to get that right now. So I'm like, okay, I don't mind if I get vague spoilers. Maybe I'll get interested in this. And that tends to happen with Alan's channel because he does a lot of reviews for the books that are new releases of not very prominent authors. And so I usually love watching those reviews, and not to mention he's just great at it.
I appreciate it. I think I'm one of the less spoiler phobic people on BookTube because I read the backs of books like it's my job. Like, I don't know how I'm supposed to decide what book I want to read without reading the back. Like, I've always read the back of books. And every now and then I do get spoiled on something. Like, I'm reading The Third Risen Kingdoms, book right now, and the back of it, I'm halfway through that book, and something finally happened. It's not a huge deal. It just talks about two characters getting separated, and like, it doesn't bother me knowing that they're separated in the first two books. It doesn't bother me. So for me, it's always like, if it would appear in the trailer for a movie, and I'm not talking about modern day trailers where they literally spoil everything in the bloody movie. I'm talking about like old trailers that was like, hey, come watch this movie because what it's about. So like, the only things that I can't, guys, top hat guy, the only things that I can't abide are character death spoilers. Like, I don't understand how people drop that crap like, like it's candy. Like, don't spoil that a character's gonna die. Like, please don't. And when you talk about how, I've talked about this before, when you talk about how horribly emotional the ending was, you're pretty much signaling that someone died at the end. Like, not always. So before everyone in the comments is like, no. Like, I know, not always, but a large part of the time, it's because someone died at the end. So I don't like that. But otherwise, like, when the inciting incident is spoiled for me, that doesn't bother me because it usually happens in like, first, second, third chapter. I'm okay with it. Like, movie trailers do that. You know what I mean? Like yeah. I know that they're not going to stay mild mannered for very long. Someone's going to get kidnapped. Like, I knew that Liam Neeson's daughter was kidnapped in Taken, because otherwise ain't no one going to see it. So, so that's just kind of where I am. It doesn't bother me as much. I mean, I don't know. But I do hate when people just like come out with like blatant spoilers. What isn't a spoiler is, guys, I'm just gonna wait down here, okay? Sorry guys. What I hate is when people say that titles are spoilers. It's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. It can't be. Like, titles can't be spoilers, guys. Like, it can't be. Like, I don't go to a movie theater and say, just pick one for me. Like I don't. Like, I don't want to know the name. I don't want to know the name of the movie I'm seeing. Like, I don't get that, because none of us read stuff without knowing the name of the book we're reading. But I don't know. I do understand, however, that some people don't like that kind of stuff, and so I think it's important to just know the reviewers that you follow, because like, people who watch my videos know exactly the kind of stuff I'm going to talk about in a review. And there's some people who are completely a spoiler, which, if you don't like reading the back of the book, then those are the people you watch. And then some people who just like literally don't care. These are the people who look up the entire plot on like Wikipedia, because they don't care. My buddy Finn's like that. He's like, he didn't care, and like it doesn't really spoil it for him to know stuff.
Yeah, I think there's different sensitivity to spoilers. And to answer Derry here, or to respond to this comment here, I did read the one research study that I know was mentioned on a previous video on another channel about
Bookborn.
No, I don't think, actually, she and I might have talked about this actually on Why Read, but there is one study that talks about it that I have been able to find, and it was on short stories, that apparently if people were spoiled for short stories, that they enjoyed the story more than if they weren't spoiled for it beforehand. They did a controlled study to find this. But the problem is that's not been tested for a long epic fantasy series or book. I feel like that's a totally different ballgame, in my opinion. Yeah. So if you're going to invest a lot of time and energy, and if I just told you how book 10 in Malazan ends, I don't think people would appreciate that. I'd appreciate that nobody spoiled the ending.
That would be awful. Yeah.
So I think that there's probably a difference depending on the length of the book, and of course, some people are just more sensitive than others.
I was spoiled on a major like character death in Greenbone Saga, but thankfully it was one towards the beginning of the series, not towards the end. But and it was totally my fault for clicking on spoiler bars in Discord. But that definitely,
and like, that's not even kind of what we're talking about. You going and clicking on spoiler bars.
Oh no, but that definitely decreased my enjoyment, and like it would have been such a surprising, interesting moment in the book and series for me if I didn't know. And so just, that was one instance. I try not to be spoiled most of the time on things, but
the most recent JRPG my friend and I played, we get all the trophies, and one of the trophy names literally just said, "Find out that so and so is the actual ringleader," and we're like, that would have been a really awesome twist if it literally didn't tell us who the mastermind was in the trophy title. And there's no excuse for that. There's no excuse. Anyway.
Yeah.
I was wondering if we could transition to another topic really quickly.
Sure.
Ben, have you read any Discworld?
Okay, so I have just read Mort. I have been meaning to get into the City Watch series, but Mort was okay. I loved the Death character, but Death wasn't actually on the page that much. Wasn't totally enraptured by the Mort plot around that character. And I did enjoy the writing in a lot of places. So I want to continue on with City Watch stuff, or maybe some of the standalones or the moist stuff, like with
here's people's Discworld journal. People's Discworld journey. They hear me say read Guards first. Then they hear everyone else say, "Oh, you got to read the Death books," and then they ignore me because that's how it goes. And they read Mort, and they're like, "Eh," and I'm like, "Cool, should have read Guards." So that's literally what everybody does. Because no one listens to me. Everyone thinks that, like, whatever, Guards.
I started with Guards.
Yes, you did. Why have you not read Men at Arms?
I read Men at Arms. I haven't
Watch, Kronk's about to tell me the City Watch are the worst books.
No.
No. I read the whole series in publication order.
Nice. Yeah, my first book was Hogfather. My friend let me borrow Hogfather, which sold me, and then I went back and read From Color of Magic all the way through in publication order. But I started with Hogfather.
See, a lot of people don't appreciate the fact that there are so many sub-series within Discworld. Each one appeals to a different reader. And so for me, I adore the Witches novels. And whenever I join BookTube, everyone's like, Guards, and Death. They're the only two. Everything else sucks. I was like, whoa. But
Weird Sisters is one of my favorite books.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah. Like, it's all fairy tales, classic literature. Like, that's right up my alley with the literature background. So I just thought everything in it was fascinating. But it's like everyone needs a different jumping in point, And it sounds like Mort wasn't the one for you. I loved Mort personally, but that's fine, Yeah, try the City Watch. Absolutely.
And I have Small Gods and Going Postal ready to try as well.
Small Gods is good, but overrated. Small Gods gets a lot of play on BookTube as being amazing because a lot of the larger audience booktubers like to recommend Small Gods. It's fine. Like, Small Gods is good. It is not as good as you have been led to believe. I think The Truth is a better standalone. I think The Truth is fantastic. So if you want to read a standalone, I'd read The Truth, or Monstrous Regiment is really good. Small Gods it's fine. Like, it's fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with Small Gods. It's really good. The only book you shouldn't read is Pyramids, which is trash.
Yes.
I dislike Pyramids so much. I hate it. I hate Pyramids.
So
everyone knows it's the worst one.
Wow.
Thank you, Kronk. I had someone try to argue with me, say Pyramids is amazing. I'm like, okay, like,
he
all right.
He changed his mind on the story halfway through. It's two different books kind of spliced together.
Thank you. The first half is amazing. The first half of the book is tremendous.
Yeah.
We have an accord, Gronk. We have an accord, 100%. And
honestly,
I love the witch books.
Yeah, the character needed two stories, two separate books. And one would have been the Assassin Quest, one being the Pyramid plot line. But to put them together, they didn't work. Not at all. Yeah. I mean, I think it was still, within the first 10 books, the whole series was very experimental. He did a lot of weird stuff, which was very much testing the waters. And from books 10 onwards, from like 11 onwards sort of thing, he really was like, okay, I know what I'm doing now. And he had a very clear idea and picture and tone. But the first one's experimental, and that's why some of the weirdest stuff is in there. But yeah, no, Pyramids didn't work.
So it sounds like you're in for a treat, Ben, whenever we get to
Yes, no, I gotta dive in more. I've read some P.G. Wodehouse earlier and enjoy that kind of just like funny British satirical style of writing, and so I think this girl could really be for me.
Terry Pratchett says things about humanity that no other author I read does in a way that is so. Like, I just can't describe how, I mean, if anybody who watched my channel, like Sam Vimes, like Sam Vimes is my avatar, right? Like I believe everything Sam Vimes does, and because he always does the right thing. Like he just does. Like he does the best he can, and like he believes that just because you were born into this family doesn't mean that the rules don't apply to you. And thinking that someone's life is worth less because they live in this neighborhood of Ankh-Morpork instead of in this neighborhood is, I mean, it's absolutely preposterous. Like he has no tolerance for these people who just think they're above other people. And like in Jenga, there must be a policeman for kings. Like even kings have to have a policeman. Like someone has to. You've got to have someone holding you accountable, no matter how high you are. You have to be held accountable by somebody, and that's who Vines of the Watch are. And I love that he inspires that in the people around him, who are also they're just ne'er do wells at worst and layabouts at best, and he brings out the best in them. Like so that Vines' quest for justice, and the ability. Like I wish I had the ability to throw an axe on the table to remind all of the guild heads that it's just it's fantastic, and so that's why I connect with Vines and the Guards, and everything that's being said in the Guards books is just like it's just magnificent. Like if it was in a different book, people would say it was preachy, but Pratchett just handles it in such a human way. You feel Vines' rage, like you feel the simmering rage underneath for how unfair people are, and I love it. It's just, and I also like mysteries.
The Boots quote is just one of my favorite quotes of all time.
The Vines boot theory of economics, and that's 100% true. I wear, like, the only expensive clothes that I wear are my loafers, and that is because when I tried to buy less expensive loafers, the heel was falling, because I wear the same shoes every single day. So the heel was falling off of them in 7 months. Meanwhile, if I had just paid a little more for the loafers I normally wear, I wear those 3 years, and the sole's still not falling off. Like when you buy cheap stuff, it breaks, and you end up spending more money. I mean, that is 100% true. The Vines theory of the Vines boot theory of economics, 100%.
Yeah, I was curious about this. Did you two know this? Because I didn't know this. Or did any of you?
Oh, about Neil Gaiman. Yes, I see the comment.
I did hear that. I did read that somewhere.
I didn't know that. I know they wrote Good Omens together, which I've read.
Yeah. And I know that Neil Gaiman is very much like the Pratchett, carries the spirit onwards. He's like the heir to the empire in that sense. Yeah, Neil Gaiman is such a hero of mine.
Oh, who was? Which one?
Neil Gaiman. Neil Gaiman, just absolute hero of mine. I just think he's one of the greatest human beings on the planet. Just one of the nicest guys. Yeah. That's
cool. That
was
Oh, no. Yeah. Gosh, I was going to ask something. Oh, yeah. Something I would love somebody to do someday is just for my own nerdy enjoyment would be, I wish somebody, just dropping this here, if anybody wants to take this on someday, to do a video comparing the humor of Joe Abercrombie's First Law, especially Age of Madness specifically, to Discworld. Because I feel like, I don't know if I'm wrong about this, but I get a sense of like British humor similarities, but I don't feel like I'm an authority on it.
I think Alan's just gonna love the Age of Madness. I know it's many books away, but I think the themes there and of like his take on the French Revolution and satirizing the French Revolution will connect to Alan a lot. But just connected back to the beginning of our discussion and why we read, like hearing Alan get so pumped up about talking about these themes in Pratchett that reflect the real world and get us emotional and get us rooting for certain characters or ethics and things like that is so awesome that we could read fiction and Pratchett could communicate right to us wherever we're living in time and space and we could get his prose, his thoughts, his take on the world and just it really is an amazing magical thing that authors can communicate to us that way.
I think with Discworld, one of the mistakes that people make is they go into it like it's oversold on funny. Like the humor in it is oversold. Like especially like Guards is one of the funniest of the Discworld books, in my opinion. And that is because the opening scene with the elucidated brethren, the Ebon Knight, is, I mean, it's just hilarious. But like, they're not really guffaw books, you know, like every now and then I'll star something because it's just a horrible pun. Like, I don't know, there are many, but like as it went on, I thought the books got less funny as they went on. Like Night Watch is not a funny book. Like yes. there are some like really good lines, but there's nothing funny about Night Watch. But Night Watch is a tremendous book, and so I think people get the wrong idea going into Discworld. They're like, oh, it wasn't that funny. And it's like, well, you're misunderstanding. Like it's not. The humor is just there. It's just kind of this way it's written that shows you what Pratchett's trying to show you without clubbing you with it, without it feeling like he's clubbing you with it. It kind of takes some of the absolute bite out of what he's saying. And now they are funny. Like what Weird Sisters, Granny screaming at the actors on stage because she doesn't understand what a play is. In Weird Sisters is one of the funniest things. Like screaming. It's like it was that guy. It's like Granny, like stop. You're like, why are you screaming at everybody? So it can be funny, but I think people think that it's only funny, and it's not. Like the humor is secondary to the thematic work that he's trying to get across.
I think readers and reviewers might oversell in general the like humorous things in books, or just that generalize a book as being a humorous one or comedic one if it just had the lightest of tones compared to just like the completely dark, grim style of read with no lightness to it. And just because there are so much of that in fantasy and science fiction, the kind of humorless books that I think ones that with a little bit of a lighter tone can seem like really, really different. But like Becoming a Druid was a recent read of mine, which I was maybe going in expecting more of a light, humorous romp, and it's very high stakes, serious, dramatic, epic fantasy with a bit of a sardonic POV character who is clever and maybe occasionally cracking a joke internally, but not an overall like a comedic or humorous book. And so it is interesting. I think like after reading more, I can see where Alan's coming from, that it's not trying to just crack endless jokes and not be serious storytelling.
Yeah. What about you, Kronk? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think for one, humor is hard to do in a book form. So much of humor when we watch it on TV or on like a stand-up show is the presentation, the delivery, the timing, all those little micro decisions that go into it really help the joke land. But to do it entirely in just like a flat monotone prose is hard to do. And because it's so hard to do, it's so rare to see it done so well. And I think that's what sort of stands out as well. But I think it's what Alan was saying is that it was secondary to the real picture that Pratchett's trying to paint of humanity. And I think I said it in my Discworld video that the humor is like the sugar that helps the medicine go down.
Nice.
It very much helps to ease us into these things. So I want to I'll get around to it one day. I haven't scheduled it, but I want to do a video comparing Terry Pratchett with Terry Goodkind, who does the Sword of Truth series. So that's a series I should have DNF'd, but I ended up reading all 12 books and hating all 12 books because of
12 books, goodness.
I know.
No, I'm right with you. Like if you start something, you got to know how it goes,
that's
how it
even
ends.
more
like,
hardcore than me. That's even more hardcore than me. I have a book. I have a video on my channel called the BookTube advice I don't follow, and it's about why I don't DNF books. But I do make an exception for audiobooks. I do DNF audiobooks now and then because I'm very particular about certain narrators sometimes. And I mean, it just depends with audiobooks. But with physical books, if I start a physical book visually, I'm on that journey. But I will DNF a series if after the book one, I'm like satisfied with what I got out of it, or I just don't feel compelled to read on, or it didn't work for me. But tell me about your stance on this. I'm curious.
What kept you going there?
Oh, well, look, I had a friend who was trying to tell me that The Sword of Truth was the best
Mm.
series ever. And I read the first two. I was like, no, it's not. And like, no, you got to read more. And I kept reading, no, you got to I will prove this to you. And it turns out they just had very strong personal attachment to the story that kind of motivated. But the thing is, the Sword of Truth series and Terry Goodkind, he passed away a few years ago. Goodkind was a libertarian, which I think is a very popular philosophy in America, not so much here. But he is extremely heavy-handed in putting his personal beliefs into the story, to the point where in the later half of the series, he just does huge rants on the page that just completely distract from the story. And it's just so in your face, socialism and charity is bad and individualism is the greatest freedom. And it's intense.
I don't like that in general, like when books do that. Yeah.
No, yeah. And I'd love to do a comparison video saying, so this is how you don't put your personal beliefs into story, where you don't make it heavy-handed and you don't make it the focus, but then do it like Pratchett, who used lots of humor, who kind of wove it into the story and was heavy-handed in certain parts, particularly the latest books. Once he'd had his diagnosis, his terminal diagnosis, he was very heavy-handed in his final books. But he was always weaving his beliefs into the story in a way that added value to the story and added richness and depth, rather than just everyone needs to listen to me. I have a very strong opinion I care about. He never did that, and I have so much respect for his methods in that sense. But yeah, the humor was absolutely what made it work.
That sounds like a great video idea. Yeah,
I think so too.
Love to see we don't see too many comparisons between authors, I think, in booktube videos in general, and that one sounds very interesting and worthwhile to dig into. And just think, I imagine that in almost every novel and almost every book, even if an author's not consciously trying to put forth certain beliefs or agendas, that just it comes through almost through osmosis. I would imagine it. And so I feel like that's one of the values of reading, is that you experience other people's worldviews and perspectives, and it gives you a window into another way of viewing things. And so I'm reading The Realm of the Elderlings now, and just sitting. I just finished Live Ship Traders, and now reading Fool's Errand, and I'm feeling like I'm imbibing the characters' perspectives and worldviews, but also getting Robin Hobb's her worldview and perspective on things as well. And that's one of the joys of reading. And if that conflicts with your personal beliefs, I think that can be very intense and frustrating, but also valuable in a way to see what other people are believing that are different from you. But yeah, it is something that in my fantasy science fiction reads, if it's woven in very seamlessly, I do tend to prefer that, since I like to be immersed in the narrative and not taken out and removed. And so yeah, I have to shout
out. I have to shout out Derry here too, because Derry is our Hob queen in this little corner of BookTube, and she also is a huge Discworld fan too, and lives in New Zealand. So not terribly. She's in the same. She's in the same time zone as you. So that's beautiful.
She's great with Hob, and all the praise for Hob is well deserved, at least from where I'm sitting. And just like the beginning of Fool's Errand, you're sitting in this more rural, isolated cottage kind of setting. And I just knowing that Robin Hobb also, has lived in a kind of rural cottage setting, like I feel like, she's kind of transmuting some of her own personal experience here, like on the page, through what the characters are experiencing and the setting. And it felt very cozy, and also like a very different kind of just setting than one I've ever lived in. And so it's just one of the things I love about reading, is I'm transported to a completely different and unfamiliar lifestyle and situation, and just get to experience that and live, a different life for, the hours that I'm with that book, and just love it so much. But yeah, what you get from the author, you also you want to be, I think, conscious as a reader of maybe, imbibing an author's worldview, but it is interesting that we do get that kind of communication through books. Sometimes maybe not so obviously.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. So I'm very early in my Realm of the Elderlings journey. I've only read the first trilogy, so I'm very excited to read on. And I do love the way that Hobb approaches themes, because I felt like even just months later after reading them, I was able to look back and just see it in new ways, kind of like you could just keep looking at it and it keeps unfolding. And that's usually my favorite type of story. But what you were saying about the preachy theme approach, that's just something that I don't have. So it's interesting because I tend to, I did a review on R.F. Kuang's Babel,
Mm.
and that was a book that did not really resonate with me for that specific reason. I felt like she was just very heavy-handed with the themes, and it was her kind of telling you these themes, and they were themes I agreed with.
Yeah.
There were things I actually agreed with,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I felt like she was it felt like, she was doubting the intelligence of the reader
Yeah,
after a certain point.
especially with the footnotes. Yeah, I could have done without
Yeah.
the footnotes.
Oh,
Yeah.
me too. Yes. And so, it's interesting because I think some people are like, I don't know. I've thought about this more, and I think I'm not personally against themes that are on the nose or that are transparent in a story. I have no problem with that personally. It's more if you're just showing one side and you're not giving an invitation for your reader to
Mm.
question things and to think about things critically. I think that that's what I would have to say about that. So I do appreciate that about Hob because I feel like it's subtly woven in to get you to think about things and to question those things.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, the
absolutely.
first thing I think of is the race of the Chalcidians, where their entire culture is based on chauvinism. And every time one of those men talk about their opinions, they talk about women as if they are lesser. And it's it is showing the other side, even though it's clearly wrong and it is appropriately vilified.
Yeah.
But she doesn't just make them sound like idiots. Like they've actually got, in a weird way, logic behind what they're saying, and it's clear that she's gone to the effort to get into the mindset of someone with a reprehensible view of the world and actually try to recreate it in a way that would make sense from that perspective.
Yeah. Like Kyle in Live Ship Traders,
Kyle, yes,
especially like the first book. Like you start to hate everything he's doing and saying, and hating the individual. Like she gets you to just have such strong emotions in the beginning of that series, and then you get some scenes where Kyle's just talking with Kefria, his wife, and you're hearing Kyle's point of view and articulated in a way that is more just rational and caring in his own way. And yeah, just seeing the other side of some of those things that Hob just gives you the full 3D picture of everything, and it's just so deep. And yeah.
Just have to share this. But I can say for Farseer, I don't know if that would be a spoiler. Well, I was just going to say I'm going to try to be spoiler free with this. I hope I don't cross over to spoilers, but I feel like following our main protagonist in that particular trilogy, the first trilogy, I think it's really easy to judge this character as like, oh, why is this character being such a fool? Why are they making this decision or that decision? Because Hop doesn't straight out tell you things. But if you really look at that person's journey, I feel like it makes sense why they respond the way that they do.
Oh yeah.
Why they're operating on the beliefs that they're operating. And so just being able to kind of like peel back the layers in that sense. So I can relate as far as that's concerned, but I can't relate to Live Ship Traders.
I think if people have difficulty understanding character decisions, it's something I almost never actually bring up as a gripe I have, because I try to just let myself fully dissolve and not be myself reading and being in the situation. It's not me in the character's place. I'm just in the character's mind and perspective and just fully living through their eyes and seeing the world. So I it's really easy. That's just tends to be how I read by default. I don't have to really try to do that. And I think when people have trouble understanding character decisions, I think they might be inserting themselves a lot and not just fully letting go and empathizing fully, just being that character completely. And it's something that I just love in reading. And
I think it's kind of a balance too. Like sometimes you get a lot from being really empathetic with a character, being really in their eyes and in their mindset, like you're saying. But I think sometimes you can get a lot from distancing yourself and taking a step back and being like, oh, wait a minute. Like Because sometimes if we're really close, then we're like, why aren't you fighting back or doing this or that? And if
Yeah.
you take a step back, sometimes you can start to see how these things make sense. So I think there's a balance between those two things.
Oh,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love stories where the characters are allowed to make mistakes, and it's something that I have such passion for, because human beings make mistakes as well. But also, people forget how powerful it can be if the negative consequences in a story come from the character's decisions. Classic example is Luke Skywalker in Empire Strikes Back. He ignores Yoda and goes and tries to confront Vader and gets his arm cut off and makes no contribution whatsoever. It completely fails, which is just it's so important to show that they can make mistakes, so we can make mistakes, and they can recover from their mistakes, so we can recover from our mistakes. But I think so many people.
Ooh, well said. Well said.
Thank you.
Chef's
Thank you.
kiss.
Yeah,
But
that is well
people,
said.
they want to live these lives, and they get so uncomfortable if the character makes a mistake, and they get so angry, and then they kind of shut off from the character and like, oh, I hate that character. And it's like, guys, we
This
all
is
have
us.
faults, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. It does maybe cut into one's pure kind of escapist fantasies that we sometimes want to be having with the ultra competent character who never makes a
Yes.
misstep, and that can be really pleasing and fun to read. And stepping away from being true to life can sometimes be what we need in any moment too as well. But yeah, Kronk, great, well articulated there. And one reason, another reason I think you'll really love Becoming a Druid, because that is a main protagonist who is
You're
far
getting a
from
book recommendation here, hardcore.
far from perfect, and they're easy to root for, but not the cleverest with people or about danger. And so yeah, we see them making mistakes and learning from them, and so yeah, maybe even more of a sell for Becoming a Druid with you.
Oh, well, look, it's already on my list. Actually, I've had to. Sorry, Joanna, earlier you said that I'm so well read, and I was like, oh man, since joining BookTube, I'm suddenly like, there are so many books I haven't touched.
Oh, I want
I've
to hear
started
about
making
this.
a list
What have you
of it.
not touched yet? What's a
Oh,
series that you feel like you should have read or that you want
well,
to
here's the
read?
thing. So I have a love for like classic literature. So stuff from like the 70s and 80s, the old school stuff. And I do not keep up with modern trends as much as I do. A big part of it is I love completed series, and I love being able to read from beginning to end, right? So often if someone's, written book 2 of a trilogy, I'm like, I'm not going to touch it until book 3 comes out. And then everyone's doing book reviews, and I get, there's that
Yeah.
fear of missing
Yes,
out,
yes, yes.
right?
Oh yeah.
But I just have to let myself read, what I read. But a lot of people have been saying to me lately, who is it? Tad Williams is the big name.
Yes, that's
Yeah, me
another
too.
one I
Me
need to
too.
read
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it just keeps
Yeah.
coming up in all my comments, and people are like, why haven't you read Tad Williams? I'm like, I didn't realize he existed until like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, like I
think he
want
was
to get more into
influential.
yeah.
I think he was influential on George R. R. Martin too, if I understand correctly. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
he's one of those
period is-
authors where
yeah.
the current generation say
Yeah.
that he was their inspiration. Yeah, there's so many like
Yeah,
generational fantasy authors,
Yeah, I want to
I-
read
I
more
tend
into that. Like between Tolkien and the 2000s era is my big gap. I want to see more of how fantasy developed more recently with Tad Williams and Roger Zelazny and Raymond Feist and Jenny Wirtz and Guy Gavriel Kay. Like a lot of these really seminal 70s, 80s, 90s authors. I really need to start finding soon.
I just finished my first Guy Gavriel Kay book yesterday, The Lions of Alras. I don't know if I'm saying it right. Alrasan?
Yeah.
I'm sorry if I'm butchering the name, because I heard Jenny Wirtz say it earlier in a live show, and I don't say it like she does. But she's
Sorry, what's
also
the,
a huge fan of that book.
What's the name of the author again? I'm just adding that to the list
Oh,
as
sure.
well.
Guy Gavriel Kay. So the first name is Guy, and then the second name Gavriel, Gavriel, and then
Nice.
Kay, Kay. And my goodness, that book is a masterpiece. I finished that book and I was thinking, this is why I read. It's so good.
Nice.
And it's a standalone. And he mostly writes standalones. I think some of his books cross over, like some are set in the same world or have crossover characters, but they're standalones. But that book was I thought it was riveting. I thought it was beautiful. It's like action packed, but it has passion and romance and poetry and it religious strife. There's like the setup of a kind of a holy war, but oh my goodness, it's so well written, beautiful prose. It just made
Can
me
we
so
investigate?
emotional.
Can we investigate why that might have worked so well? So I'm interested in this question too, and I have a hypothesis that
Mhm.
at least for me, it's almost like a binary proposition. Like, is the book connecting with me, and am I feeling immersed and engaged and emotionally connected to it? And if I am, like, it's great. It's a 5 or 4 star read for me. And if not, I find all these issues with it that I'm wondering, like,
Did
these
you read
issues might
it?
exist. Oh, no. I haven't
Oh,
read Lions of Alrasan yet or GGK, but I'm just thinking about, like, what goes into these us connecting with the read so much. And there's the
yeah.
elements, like you're saying, the setting and the prose. And
Well, I am a
like,
settings
yeah.
person. So I am a settings person, to be fair. But okay, so let me try to see if I can explain this. So one thing that I really loved about this book is that we follow primarily 4 characters, but it's the way he introduces these characters so that you immediately get a sense of their personalities immediately. And there are 3 characters that are adults. It's not like a lot of fantasy, I feel like, focuses on coming of age, and I love
Yep.
coming of age fantasy, don't get me wrong, but it was different to read a story that had more of an adult perspective. And there was one character who was a teenager, and then several other characters that build out this world. And I was thinking about this as I was reading. I was thinking, this is what I love about epic fantasy specifically, is that there is this big macro perspective of all these like geopolitical things happening. And this particular book is evocative of medieval Spain. So it's a secondary world, but the way the map is, it has a land called Esperania, kind of like
Ooh.
España. And so it's basically trying to bring up, I guess, a certain conquest that happened in medieval Spain, but in a fantasy way. So it's drawing on certain influences that are real and historical. And we have 3 religions that are reminiscent or I can't say the word, like that are like analogies to real
Mm.
world religions
Yeah.
like Islam, Christianity, and
Judaism, probably.
Judaism.
Yeah.
Judy?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Judaism. And the characters are from these different religions, but you get like I said, you get a very quick, distinct feeling of each of these characters as soon as they're introduced. And then once they intersect, there's like this chemistry that comes off the page, but it never his prose. And what I mean by it's really good prose, in my opinion, is it never feels forced. Like it feels like he has such an easy, natural way of creating these characters, creating that connection between the characters, and they don't automatically trust each other. They're all
Mm.
clever, they're all well traveled. It makes sense why they're
Ooh,
clever. It
interesting.
makes sense why they're intelligent. They're all a little prickly at first with each other, but that distrust slowly progresses to respect, like I respect you, and then it grows into loyalty and love, and then all types of crazy tests that they must confront based on what's happening on an epic scale in the world. And so, again, going back to the point of like why I think I love epic fantasy is because we have that zoomed out approach of this big, huge conflict going on at the world in the
Yeah.
world at large, but then zoomed in to these really beautiful, powerful character perspectives. And then Kay ties in poetry and so many beautiful moments that are not just heavy, high stakes moments, but also just moments where friends are joking with each other or laughing, drinking together. And then the settings. I am a settings person. So just beautiful setting, like descriptions of the desert and palaces with streams running through them and marble domes. I love that
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Oh
So
man, I'm picking
I
this book up next month. You're getting me so just excited about this read, and it's like, oh my god, the passion's just flowing off. But it's so fascinating hearing all these different aspects of it, like the prose and the characters and the particulars about the characters and the setting and the history and the context and the plotting was just all working synergistically, as
yes,
with a lot
beautiful.
of
Yeah.
pieces of art, like with an orchestra piece or an opera or a movie. There are all these different aspects, the particulars of the writing, and then with visual media, like how things actually look and how they're framed and filmed and acted, and the actual like playing of the music, whether it's for an orchestra or for a movie, all these different elements affecting our experience. And sometimes I think it's a mixture of aspects that we can't fully unpack from each other, and that they all work together in a very particular way in a particular book.
Yeah, I like what you said. It's like beautifully orchestrated. It felt symphonic in a way. And I felt like the way it ended, even though it's a standalone book, I felt like I lived this journey with these characters. Like I lived several years with them. And I've been emotional, honestly, since closing that book. It was that good. So I'm sorry. I rambled on.
Oh, no, it's great. That was awesome. That was awesome.
Ramble on.
Yeah.
Loved it.
No, that's what this is all about.
Yeah, recommend Lions of Al Rassan. I'll definitely be picking
yeah.
up some other K in the future.
Like it sounded like that book transcended your existence, that you tapped into something greater and experienced new things and felt powerful emotions. And I think in everyday life, I don't get too many opportunities to experience powerful emotions, I think, on a day-to-day basis. And so it's just the magic, I think, of epic fantasy in particular, like you said, with that high stakes situations, without all the baggage of our actual real world or our real history and how it has to be exactly true to life. Just I think gives authors a freedom to tell really emotional and powerful stories and in creative, really creative ways.
Yeah, I totally agree. And Kronk, that particular author, I think he got his fame because he co-wrote the Silmarillion, Tolkien's Silmarillion. He helped edit or put that together.
Oh, yes. Now I know who you're referring to. Yeah.
So that's how he got his start. And he's known for, and by the way, I feel like I should say this, and this actually would be an interesting transition to your ACOTAR video, which I wanted to ask you about, because Kay is known for his sex scenes. Like, every time I've heard about this author before, especially for Tigana, which is probably his more famous book, though I've heard from a lot of friends around here that Lions of Al Rassan is better. I don't know. I haven't read Tigana, but he's known for having a lot of sex scenes. Now, they did not, I didn't think they were that, I don't know. I didn't even think about him. I'll just say that. I finished the book and that wasn't my first thought. It was like, that was an amazing story. But there are sex scenes now that I think about it. And I think they served the purpose, not necessarily, I don't feel like they were there necessarily to elicit a response from the reader, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I feel like they were there more just to give you a real, natural, realistic perception of the characters and the character dynamics. So
that's what I felt like in Greenbun Saga. In Greenbun Saga too, I felt that way. There are a bunch of sex scenes, but they felt really worked into the characters' journeys and weren't there like some of the scenes in the Song of Ice and Fire maybe felt unnecessary at times. But no, I'm curious. I have not seen the ACOTAR video.
Yeah, tell us about Romantasy and your journey.
Well, it's really interesting when you say that, like, a lot of sex scenes in books feel natural because if you put people in a situation like that, that's what will happen. And it's actually really distracting to me when that doesn't happen, because then you can feel the author inserting themselves and censoring the story and being like, none of that, no mating, right?
Wow. Yeah.
That's my thought. But there's a bit of a rule with writing, actually. I haven't heard anyone say it, but the idea is that a sex scene is like an action scene in an action movie, is like a song in a musical. It has to advance the plot, or it doesn't need to be there. And the idea is a song can be great, and an action scene can be great, and a sex scene can be very enjoyable, but it needs to actually serve a purpose in order to be worth including. And I think it's noticeable when it's just gratuitous and just there because that's what the author wanted to put in there. But then you can notice when you can actually say, oh, this is like the culmination of the relationship build-up, or it's about this character is recovering and healing from trauma, or some sort of catharsis of what they're going through, and that's when it really resonates. It really is more about the emotion than the actual act itself. And that's what I think a lot of people who deliberately avoid reading sex scenes, I think that's what they don't get. It is about the emotional resonance that it has.
Yeah, even in A Feast for Crows, that's a great point. I think a lot of people complain about some of the actual prose details, like some of the word choice in some of the sex scenes in Song of Ice and Fire. And but I think the scenes themselves actually are really important for those characters' journeys and their emotional, where they are kind of emotionally in those moments. And so, yeah, I think Derry had a comment here recently where it's like fantasy itself as a modern genre does not often have a lot of it. So it may be readers aren't prepared for it, or it's not just
Very true.
they're not expecting it, and so it might be shocking. But yeah, when I was reading a lot of contemporary fiction before fantasy, yeah, it can be a lot more of that stuff going on, and so it doesn't tend to phase me. Yeah.
I think that one of the challenges that maybe a fantasy author would face with writing a sex scene is, like you were saying, Kronk, that it feels almost like it's censored or unnatural when they're not progressing in a natural, a natural way. But I think some fantasy authors might run the challenge of like suddenly totally changing the tone of their writing to write those scenes. And those are the times when I feel pulled out, when I feel like, oh, wow, this is kind of like, it feels incohesive with the rest of the tone of the story. With Kay, for example, I never felt that. I never felt like any of the sex scenes, like I said, I felt like his prose it's smoothly blended into those scenes. It just felt like a natural progression.
Did it not feel cohesive with Feast for Crows?
It didn't bother me personally.
Yeah.
I mean,
same.
It's wild. I can understand why people don't like it. But actually, no, I think it served a purpose. Are we talking? Which one are we?
Oh, there's multiple
about?
things on a ship, and then in a Dorne, and then things going on in King's Landing. But I always thought that they were essential scenes. But I actually enjoyed all the scenes. Didn't notice anything that took me out in terms of the word choice. But then when I watched some live chats and things, it seemed like people had some strong reactions to some of the scenes and the specific word choices that Martin used. But it's interesting. What pulls some people out doesn't pull me out, and so it's all subjective in the end.
Yeah, it personally didn't bother me. I don't know if that's an unpopular opinion.
Yeah.
But I felt like even I can't give away spoilers, but like there was one particular scene that's pretty disturbing in A Feast for Crows, concerning a female character. And I felt like it served a purpose in highlighting certain things that she's gone through in the past and ways she was processing that. So, like, I don't know. I felt like he paid attention to character voice in those scenes, what those characters were naturally thinking. And the ship scene, I liked that scene, actually.
Yeah.
I thought that made sense.
Totally.
I guess I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah.
Carl, do you want to talk about that?
No, I agree with you there, actually. Yeah. Well, it's funny, though, because speaking of just ACOTAR, one of the things that I didn't mention in my video, and I kind of regret, I didn't want to get too political, right? But I think there is such a trend in pop culture to just sort of automatically beat down on any sort of book, movie, or TV show that is seen as too girly, right? Or for women, right? And ACOTAR and Twilight were both, teenage girls like it, well, then it must be awful and you're stupid for liking it, right? And I think that a lot of women's literature will more frequently include sex scenes. And therefore, there can be a bit of a correlation between, if it's girly and there's sex scenes, then it must be stupid, right? And I think it's unhelpful, I think that, I don't know, I'm getting a bit sharing my personal beliefs now, but I do think we live in a Puritan culture that does have a lot of, sex shaming. And I think that there's a lot of benefits to normalizing the conversation. And more than that, letting people know that they can talk about it if they have questions or if they have problems, and knowing that it's safe to discuss and be like, hey, is my experience normal? Is my experience healthy? And just continuing that conversation in a positive way can genuinely help people. And so I think the aversion we have to seeing sex in fiction can contribute to a culture of just saying, no, keep it all hush hush, don't talk about it. And I don't think that really helps anyone. I just think that's about helping us all feel more comfortable, and not necessarily happier. Does that make sense?
I 100% agree with that. I love that.
I love hearing people 100% agree with me.
No, I do, because I'm all for sex positivity. And I do think, I I feel like I tend to disagree with the idea that it should always fade to black or
Yeah.
um, that didn't add anything to the story. I don't usually
Yeah.
come across with that opinion
It's
personally.
it's one of the reasons I
Um,
want to read the Cushiel series by Jacqueline Carey, but I have about 600 books on my TBR. I can't
Now
figure out how
I'll
to
be honest.
prioritize them.
Now I'll be honest. I did start that series about 11 years ago, and it was after I read A Song of Ice and Fire the first time. And so I thought, oh, I didn't think about it. I didn't know what I was getting into actually with that series. I started the first book and I DNF'd it. It's like actually one of the famous DNFs I have that I mentioned in my video because I got to a certain point and I was not comfortable. I had a personal boundary, and I think this is another thing. As much as I'm for sex positivity, I am also for readers honoring their boundaries. And if they're reading
Yes.
something that doesn't make them comfortable,
Mhm.
then they should, by all means, feel comfortable DNFing. And I've said that many times about trigger warnings and everything. And so, like with me in that particular book, there was S&M, like sadomasochistic stuff that
Mhm.
was happening. And I understand that the author does not linger there. That's what I've been told. But for me, it felt like that was so emphasized, and I just got very uncomfortable with this character just enjoying being beaten for sexual pleasure. That I couldn't do it, and I thought I was tough at that point. I was like, I've read A Song of Ice and Fire. I can handle anything. I was like, no, I can't handle this. Like it was too much for me. Maybe I'll revisit it someday. Ugh, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think that's I don't want to overshare too much. I'll be considerate, but it's like reading books and sex have that in common, where you got to do what's comfortable for you and not push yourself beyond that. I think there's a limit to, like, you can definitely experiment, right? But you shouldn't push yourself to a point where you know you don't like it and you're doing it because you think you should, right? And that's, I think, exactly what you said, the healthy boundary. And yeah, it applies to a lot of life principles.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And I
I hope I
wanted to
worded that all right.
No, you did. You worded
Good.
it beautifully. So
Okay.
thank you. I wanted to transition this actually to your first law video, which was amazing, by the way. I
Thank
was
you
so
so
impressed
much.
with it.
It's
But I
massively
really,
underperformed, but thank you.
really, oh, I'm
Yeah,
shocked.
no, it
Well,
didn't get
mine's
much of a viewpoint, but that's okay.
Oh, it'll grow, I'm sure, over time. That's a nice thing about all your videos. They seem to be like very evergreen. So I'm sure what's called evergreen content. So
That's the goal.
I'm sure that it'll get more views over time. But you gave a wonderful, probably my favorite definition I've heard of grimdark. And I think I mentioned that in my comment
you.
that I've
You
ever
did,
heard on
yeah.
BookTube, because this has been like a debate on BookTube for a while. What is grimdark? And Kronk had such great criteria for what he would consider a grimdark story. Yeah, so I thought we could maybe visit that for a minute, but go ahead, Ben. I know you want to say
Yeah,
something.
no,
Yeah.
no. I just
What are your thoughts on this?
I haven't watched that video yet, so I'm curious. I'm curious about the grimdark definition.
Yeah,
I'll see
sure.
if I can recap it. Do you want me to try to recap? Or
Oh, you can. I was happy to recap. I don't mind, but
oh no, go ahead. Go ahead. You go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, I think I actually put together like 7 rules to just sort of make it easy. But there were things like character arcs don't always end well, and plot lines don't always end well. So a lot of character arcs, we are familiar with seeing them go from, they start out kind of bad, they progress, and then they end in a really good place. But in Grimdark, we often see them go the opposite way, where they start off good and end up bad, or they just kind of have a flat character arc where they don't change at all. So we're all about, it is about breaking those expectations. I hate the term, what was it? Subvert expectations, because that's such a overused term, but there is a lot of that in Grimdark, where you deliberately break the tropes that you're familiar with. But yeah, it can mean that a lot of things end in failure. And it is like the first Game of Thrones book, where you get that rather famous pivotal character death, where no one was expecting it at the time, but it's so normal now. By early in the story setting up a plot line or a character that fails, we start feeling more tense that anything could fail from this point onwards, because there's greater realism and consequence if things don't work out. So I think a lot of people I said it a few times. A lot of people just go, "Oh, it's grim and violent and brutal." I'm like, yeah, it's just kind of like that's icing on the cake, really. You know, the real meat of the substance is the genuine risk of failure and how that influences the story.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think I can really buy into that definition, just because I compare it to a series like Wheel of Time, where some dark things happen in a lot of the books, and it can have often a pretty dark and gritty tone, lots of violence, um, and but the overall feel of it as you're reading through the series is that you're on this journey where this hero's journey where things are going to go well for a lot of the protagonists, or that the entire situation is eventually going to be worked out in a satisfying way. And I just felt that way from early on in the Wheel of Time, and there's almost a sort of comfort to those kinds of reads and series where you feel like it's going to play out in a certain way. But yeah, when you don't have those expectations, you're right, it is just so tense the entire time, not knowing what might or might not happen. Yeah, reading through First Law was like that, and thrilling in so many ways. I think because of that overarching like lack of predictability and definitely with grittiness and violence and really dark themes, and this overall kind of lack of hope in the situation of the world. But the way you put it was really interesting. I like that.
I really like that too. I felt like when I listened to your definition, I was like, wow, he's just perfectly describing the First Law trilogy. uh, so it's interesting though, too. I think you also said that sex scenes are more realistic in the sense too, something like
Yes, yeah.
that. It's not
Well,
or at least that it's not glamorized. Is the
that's right. Yes, yes. Actually, it's really spot on. The removal of the glamour. Absolutely. There's a lot of just messy scenes, and I don't mean like messy in like literally messy, but in the sense that like people are awkward and sort of uncomfortable, unsure of what they're doing. Often there's like impetuous actions that aren't necessarily considered, and I think that can be quite realistic, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and there's not that many, but I think people, they leave a mark because people definitely talk about them, yeah.
Yeah, no, I appreciated that so much because my definition of grimdark, even though I've been trying not to use the term as much because I know that there's been so much debate about it, but I think from now on I'll just be like, this guy, the book guy, listen to his definition. But I've always thought of it as just almost like the antithesis of fantasy idealism, like it's sort of going against fantasy idealism, and also, I guess related to that, having a critical examination of character agency. Because a lot of times the whole free will thing gets put to the test. At least in the grimdark books I've read. Not to say
I have
that
not
that's
tried.
not.
Oh, I was just wondering if that's coming from at all reading R. Scott Baker. Have you read some of those yet? I have not.
Yes.
I've not. Oh yeah,
Yes.
I haven't. I have the first series to try. Yeah.
Yes, that does come from my experience reading Baker, as well as Abercrombie, as well as Michael R. Fletcher's Obsidian Black. Oh my gosh, I can't remember the name of the title series. The Blackstone Heart series.
But it's a really interesting theme that I'm personally interested in exploring. Just are we just completely autonomous free will individuals, or is it the opposite and it's just all randomness, or the random bouncing around of atoms and particles in a predetermined way almost. So it is something I'm definitely personally interested in exploring. And
some people hate that.
Yeah.
Some people hate that. They want their characters to grow and change and have this transformative hero's journey, which is what we're used to in fantasy, right? We're used to the typical heroic journey where the character starts out maybe as the unlikely hero and then transforms into something greater. And I think in Grimdark, we take a different look at that type of journey. But not to say that it always ends up exactly like there's absolutely no free will. I think that there could be a spectrum when it comes to that too. I don't know. That's kind of my generic view on that. But I do appreciate all the criteria you laid out in your video and that you just shared with us here.
Thank you. That's a big question, isn't it? Is there free will? Hey, yeah. I'll leave that
do either
alone.
of you do either of you have any authors or books in series that you're just itching to get to? Like I've been itching to try GGK for a while, and Joanna just maybe want to pick up Lions of Al-Rassan, but that's one I can think of that is a major one that I really want to get to and read through a lot of their books. Guy Gabriel Kay, and then in terms of series, I mean, there's so many, but Long Price Quartet and Dagger in the Coin are two. Since I love The Expanse by Daniel Abraham, who co-wrote it, and so I really want to try his solo stuff so much. So those are some of my authors that I just can't wait to try. I'm curious about yours.
Well, Ben, I noticed you did you mentioned that you're reading The Expanse in your, I think it was books 2022 in review, and you mentioned you were partway through.
Oh yeah, finished it all.
You did? Oh, fantastic! Yeah, because I just finished reading Memory. What was it? Memories Legion, the short story collection. Yeah. So that one had the final novella after the final book, sort of thing. So like I've officially
Sins of Our Fathers, so good.
Yes.
Not officially. They will release graphic novels soon that cover the time skip between books.
I signed up for their Kickstarter for it. Yeah.
Between books 6 and 7. So we are gonna get new canon, like in-world stories, but not after. I think Sins of Our Fathers is the last chronological story that will ever happen. Yeah. Oh, it was such a like an elegiac, impactful, touching way to end the whole series. I thought. I really love the final 3 books of the series and the ending trilogy and the direction it went in the last couple books. I just was so unpredictable and impactful. Just an incredible end to that roller coaster ride.
Oh yeah, I mean the whole series was always like big in scope and the stakes were high, and that final trilogy just pushed it to a new level. Where I was just like, I cannot believe how far they have taken this. It was just, fantastic. But that's a series where I think I almost think like these discussions of philosophy and like free will and determinism, they can almost be limited in a fantasy setting, and science fiction draws them out better.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Yeah, strong opinion. Like I genuinely think we need more science fiction books, because sci-fi is much more film and TV, and fantasy is much more books. And I would love to see both of that change. I want more fantasy shows and I want more sci-fi books. Absolutely. But science fiction, I think, has more capacity to blend into other genres. And that's something that I'm personally really passionate about, because I hate the dividing lines of genre so much. It's why I read sci-fi and fantasy, because I love that fantasy can introduce romance and introduce crime and mystery and thriller and blend between them. And that's why I genuinely can't read crime novels, because they're stuck in that formula. It's so predictable. But I love science fiction because you can be like, oh, this is a cool space adventure, and now it's a horror story and everyone's gonna die, right? And those sharp turns are like, oh, it's a different genre now. They're just so unpredictable, and that's just what makes it so exciting to read it.
Have you read the Dark Tower series?
Yes, I love the
because that's very genre bending, and I feel like it has some Westworld kind of vibes in it, or like little hints of sci-fi time
that's
travel.
Another one. Yeah, that's another one on my priority TBR for sure.
Oh yeah, it's fantastic.
It's weird.
Yeah, it is weird. It is really weird.
Oh, I can't wait! I can't wait for the weirdness. I do like a little weird, and I can't wait. But Sun Eater also for you, Kronk. Since that is truly a genre blend of science fiction and fantasy. The author calls it sci-fantasy is the genre of the series. It is incredible. There tends to be a lot of overlap, it seems, between people who love Robin Hobb and Christopher Rocchio. Rocchio does it's a bit of a slower pacing with a focus on really deep character work and considered prose that's elegant. And the scope, though, is so huge and futuristic with this future galaxy situation that's, I think, we're a few thousand years past our current present day. So it's kind of like a Dune-like situation where we're in another part of the galaxy and it's far future. And so it has this fantasy feel as well as being rooted in our reality. So it is purely sci-fantasy, and it's amazing. So good.
I personally haven't read The Expanse except book 1, but that was actually odd because I loved that book. Leviathan Wakes. I really
Ooh.
enjoyed it.
Oh,
Really enjoyed it.
you got a lot there waiting for you then to
But
enjoy
the
too.
thing is, I never felt like I wanted to continue. I felt satisfied. It was one of those weird
Well,
experiences.
yeah.
I was like, I enjoyed this book and I feel completed.
Yeah, no,
I don't
book
really
one,
feel like I
book
need
one
to
is
go
great,
on.
and it could totally work as its own little unique standalone.
Yeah, because talking
book
about
two, yeah.
talking about philosophy, like I really love the philosophical question that's explored about how do we disseminate information? Do we do it all at
Yes,
once?
yes,
Do we
yes,
tell everybody about this big, huge scare? Or do we keep it to
yes,
ourselves
yes.
and go through this like very carefully? I
Balancing
just appreciate that.
idealism versus actual like your consequences that you have
Yeah.
for your
Yes.
actions and
Well,
pragmatism
yeah.
versus idealism. Yeah. Oh, that was so good in that book. Yeah.
I loved it because I read that like around the time of the pandemic, and I was like the way that people were talking about it and the way people were getting scared. I was like, wow, this is kind of like exploring that question in a weird way.
And I love the fact that those are explored like through the perspective of James Holden, who is he's such an idealistic character, and he
Yes.
always is. And like he is surrounded by people who are far less idealistic than him, particularly Amos Burton, who is just the most cynical, tough bastard. I just love Amos so much. But the idea that in all the books, there's always well, for the most part, there's James Holden and other characters, and James is almost always the most idealistic person in the book.
Oh, interesting.
And so we have this dual perspective of someone who's striving for idealism despite all the setbacks, compared with someone who's far more cynical, like the guy in the first book.
Miller.
Whether it's
I
the
couldn't
cynical
remember.
detective Miller, or in future books, you get so many more perspectives. You get cynical politicians like Avasarala,
Yes.
or just
Avasarala,
warrior
so
types like Bobby. So like book 1 was a nice place to pause, Joanna, because like the series opens up in book 2 with more perspectives and the plotting, and the scope definitely increases as you go. So it starts with such an interesting alternating POV structure with just Holden and Miller, and the two writers writing. I think one of them took each of those characters. So the book has this such interesting feel where each chapter has such a different voice to it. The other books definitely feel different, just more. I think the authors just shared more of the characters and POVs in later books, but book 1 has a really unique feel to it in a cool way.
Well, I love asking people after they read it, are you a Holden or are you a Miller? I just love asking them that question because I could see both sides, and I feel like a good author can do that. So I loved the conflict, and I loved because I thought about it because one of my friends, Andy Smith, who was on BookTube a couple of years ago, he did a video review of that, and I thought the obvious answer was, I thought everybody agreed that Holden was like the right point of view. And I think it's funny. He's a politician now too, by the way. But it's funny because like it was so obvious to him, and everybody else I was talking to around there were like, "No, Miller was the one who was right." So it's not. But I might return to it someday. But I am currently reading by the same author. Well, by one of the authors, Abraham. I'm currently reading the Long Price Quartet, and I'm halfway through that right now. And I'm having the best time. I love that quartet so much.
Cool.
So I just started the 3rd book in that bind up. It's fantastic. Have you heard of it, Kronk, or read it? Or...
No, I haven't.
It's so good.
I mean,
to the list.
we both have loved The Expanse, and I think Abraham in his solo work is known for I think also being Hob-like and being a bit of a slower paced grand architect with lots of deep character work and setting work. And so I think he came into The Expanse for those strengths in his writing, and Ty Frank had the kind of world building and the situation and like all of that kind of built out. And then Daniel Abraham was brought in to really bring it to life with the characters and the prose.
I see.
And so I think it was a marriage made in heaven for The Expanse because it worked so well. But I'm so curious about the Abraham solo stuff.
And he did work with George R.R. Martin on A Song of Ice and Fire too. I think it was partly, you're probably not going to like this, Kronk, because I did watch your video on A Song of Ice and Fire. But I think I've been told, and I could be wrong about this, so correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, that it was partly his influence on George R.R. Martin splitting up A Feast for Crows and A Dance with Dragons into 2 separate books. I think that was his influence.
Oh my God. I love it. I loved it so much, the split.
Because I think it was the second author, Ty Frank, who was George R. Martin's personal assistant, and that's what
Ah,
the connection was, and that he had
Yeah.
ideas, and
oh,
he was trying to find a writer to co-author with, but I can't actually remember the details. But we can look that up, I'm sure.
yeah, yeah.
Kronk,
I
were
am
you not a big
loving.
fan? Oh yeah. Oh no. Yeah.
Go
Keep
ahead.
gushing
Go
about
ahead.
Long Press Quartet.
Oh no, yeah, I was just gonna say I love it because it's almost well, it's Japanese inspired. It's in a again secondary world, but it's Japan. It feels like Japan. Like you have
Yeah.
bathhouses and tea, people wearing robes, eating fish and rice. It feels very Japanese, and it feels like a Studio Ghibli film to me at times. Again,
Yes.
the characters are just wonderful. And again, it's kind of like A Song of Ice and Fire is such a big part of my fantasy history. I love that series so much. So it's like shaped a lot of my aesthetic when it comes to fantasy. So I appreciate in that particular series too. It's more small scale, especially the first story. It's a more contained fantasy story in the first book. But we follow characters that mostly are young in that particular first story, but we have different ages, different genders, different social classes. And so I just love that variety in the story. But it's so imaginative. And again, I'm a settings person, so I do love the
Yeah.
settings for
Oh,
that.
I can't wait. Can't wait to try it. I was gonna ask Kronk though if he was a fan of the split with the Song of Ice and with Feast for Crows and Dance with Dragons. So I have just been reading the series for the first time. I watched the show and very stupidly watched through the whole show before reading any of the books. So I greatly regret that decision. I wish I could have just gone on the journey with the books fully without having any of the show get in the way of my whole experience. So it's a weird thing that I'm dealing with, trying to disconnect from the show and what I think I know is coming in the story, and just try to enjoy the ride of the books. But and maybe knowing that I can pick up a Dance with Dragons at any point now helped my experience with A Feast for Crows, but I did not find myself missing any of the characters that were dropped. Like Daenerys, when I was reading Feast for Crows, like Daenerys who and like Bran who, like I was not even thinking about them at all. I was so engrossed with the characters we were following. The real focus around certain characters. If you don't want to know who's focused on in Feast for Crows, like stop, don't watch this anymore. Spoilers for that. But the focus around Cersei, Brienne, and Jaime just felt like gave the book such coherence and momentum with these character journeys, along with little side trips we take to the really awesome locations elsewhere in Feast for Crows. But I felt like if we would have had all of the POVs mixed in, I wouldn't have gotten that really deep journey that I got with those three characters in Feast for Crows. It just felt like there was a lot of resonance between those three narratives and those three characters. And the book felt so coherent. And I ended up feeling so happy that he had decided to split the POVs, and maybe knowing that I can pick up the next book, immediately after is helping with that.
I bet that does make a difference. I was fortunate the first time I read the series that I did have. I mean, they were all the first 5 anyway were published. The 5th one had just been published, so I'm sure that could be a different experience if you were waiting.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, similar to that, when I read the Dark Tower series, Stephen King published the first 4 books 5 years apart each, because that was just his writing style. And there's a massive cliffhanger at the end of book 3, and then a 5-year time jump. And literally, I finished that book and then picked up the next one immediately and started reading. I was like, there was 0 seconds, like less than a minute gap. But I can't imagine what that's like when the author is unpredictable with publication. Absolutely. The thing is, the split is okay. I think the decision to split side characters and main characters is what's weird. Personally, I would have split it by location. So I would have put all the characters that were involved in the Game of Thrones itself in book 1, and then put Daenerys's rise to power and the Wall and the Night Watch in another book, and split it by plot lines rather than characters. Because by spending so much time on side characters, it feels like the main plot had been forgotten, and it felt like we were spending a lot of time on low scale priority things. And that's what really bugged me. I was like, come on, what about the dragons? And what about the others? The others were just invading like 5 minutes ago, right? How has everyone forgotten about this?
It It was interesting.
But
So I was on a wonderful A Song of Ice and Fire podcast called Bend the Knee, and we were talking about A Feast for Crows. One of the hosts of that particular show, that is his least favorite book, which I'll forgive him. I love the book, but he actually pointed out something really interesting about A Feast for Crows, which is that in that particular book, if you look at the chapter breakdown, the majority of characters are female characters in that particular book, which is really interesting. So I appreciated that. I can understand what you're talking about, though. That's actually a really interesting point I hadn't thought about.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I've also
I
heard.
yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say really quickly, but I've also heard that people. I know that they're doing this on their podcast because they do a close reading on their podcast of a chapter per episode, and they said that I think that they're going to do what they're going to do for the last two books is read both at the same time, because apparently there's a reading order you could take where you read one
I have
POV
heard
and then
that, yeah.
switch to the second. Yeah, they're going to take that approach.
Man, full props to the people who can figure out which chapter fits around which chronologically. Like, I could never wrap my head around that, but
Yeah.
people do it. So well done.
Yeah, same here. Yeah. Sorry, Ben, what were you going to say?
Oh no. I'm just I'm loving hearing different takes on same book, Feast for Crows, and I could totally see that gripe you having being totally real, but just for me, I was so captivated by these side locations and then
Good.
the real like focus on those three characters. But then again, I get impatient too with resolving arcs. So like I read an Arya chapter early in the Feast for Crows, and it was just left on such a cliffhanger. I don't want to say the details, but like where she was and what she was starting doing. I was like, oh my God, I'm so into this. I needed to just continue Arya's story. So I skipped ahead and I'm like, oh my God, the next Arya chapter is like 300 pages away. And I was so happy. I skipped ahead. I read the next Arya chapter, got to a more satisfying stopping point. So like I part of me also just loves reading completed series and arcs and not having those big kind of side quests. But his Martin's side quests are so intriguing, like with the specific details of the setting and the journeys and the characters. They always just jump off the page to me that I really didn't mind not having as much momentum with the main overarching story.
Yeah,
That might be a difference of mine. Yeah, I read big series because I like big picture stuff, and so yeah, I think that would be a personal experience thing. Yeah. Sorry, Jonah.
No, I loved A Feast for Crows as well, Ben. It's weird because I remember, because I know a lot of people talk about how book 3 is the best, and some people say it's the best fantasy book ever written, and I will argue with them. But at the same time, when I read them the first time, I did not have any feeling of ranking them. Like, I just loved them all. I loved them all. And I remember my cousin at the time, who's much younger, she was reading them, or she read them before I did. And she said, oh yeah, book 3 is the best. And I said, oh really? And then I read all 5 and I loved all of them. So I don't know. I'm pretty much like, I'm just a fan of the series. I'm just really grateful for what we have. Hope we get a Winds of Winter someday. Really, really hope so. But
no, I'm right with you. When you're really loving a TV show or a book series, like to a certain extent, you could just love it all and not worry about ranking them, even though ranking can be fun and it's, as its own little activity. But I am having a lot of trouble ranking my Song of Ice and Fire reads because I've just loved all of them so much. They're just one big clump of great enjoyment, like engaged reads I've had where I've been emotionally attached and just loving it.
Same here. I love that series so much.
By the way, Kronk, you said Fire and Blood. You were like, you respect the book, but you're like, didn't really enjoy the reading or don't know who would enjoy it. But I actually loved reading that entire tome. I found it so engaging. Like just the all the little tiny details he came up with. I just was in awe of his creativity in the world building and the very specific, like dramatic details he came up with for all these different people that have gone through in the past. I just loved it. I was engrossed the whole time.
Yeah, because a lot of people in the comments section sort of leapt to the defense of Fire and Blood. And I was like, man, I think I've given the wrong impression, because I genuinely, I was trying to say quite openly, as an academic book, it's brilliant and fascinating, and I wish I could get to a level as a write something that intense. But I feel like as a book, right, as a novel, it was definitely clunkier.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are like, but it's a great book. I'm like, I never said it wasn't, but okay. but no, you're absolutely right. I'm glad you could enjoy it. For me, it was a bit of effort to read it, definitely. And I think I actually stopped about 200 pages in and just put it down and came back to it a few months later and kept going. And I had more momentum behind me that time. Yeah, but it's not bad. It's definitely not bad. Yeah.
Yeah. It's really crazy the way people on YouTube do that. It's like they'll take
I know,
something
right?
you say like that and they'll blow it up to, you hated it. Why did you hate it? You're like, that's not what I meant. That's not what I said.
No, I'm getting used to that. I've only been YouTubing for 3 months.
That's
And so I'm still
amazing.
getting used to the phenomenon of YouTube comments. And
Wow.
yeah, it's an experience. But honestly,
Yeah.
most people are just lovely, especially in the book community.
Yeah,
That's for sure.
yeah.
And then there are a lot of people who are just very passionate about their opinions, and that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have a favorite
Yeah.
series, by the way? I know that your channel mission is not so much about your personal preferences and more just to help your viewers find their favorite fantasy read. But do you have a personal preference? I know you love
That's a really
Discworld.
good
That's
question.
got to be up there. Maybe Realm of
It
the
definitely
Elderlings is up
is.
there.
Honestly, I'd say the one that I probably get the most excited about is the Cosmere on a whole.
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
I think,
Okay.
yeah, and a big part of it is the fact that it's so, like, it's current and it's expanding. So, like, I am a massive Sanderson fanboy, and I watch a huge portion of his live streams and his
Yes.
questionnaire sections, right?
Yeah, me too.
And
yeah.
and he's honestly an idol of mine. So I don't know if anyone's this might be more me than anyone else, but so he did a creative writing lectures. And he released them in 2020. And while we're all in lockdown, you know, and I was watching all the videos, but one of the things he said was, if you want, in his, he did 2 lectures on publication. So one with traditional publishing and one with indie publishing. And one of the things he said about indie publishing was, if you want to indie publish, it doesn't actually matter too much how good your product is. The quality will not automatically make it rise to the top. Or its bad quality will not make it rise to the top. You have to work it. And if you want to be an successful indie publisher, you've got to do all the marketing. And one of the things he said was, you'll never be successful if you don't have a platform. And it was then that I was like, oh, you know what? Maybe I should start a YouTube channel one day. And it was literally like his suggestion that has put me in this direction. I was just
Wait,
like, I want to
are you
publish
a writer
book.
also? Are you a writer
Yeah,
also?
yeah.
Oh,
No,
awesome,
I'm actually.
awesome. Yeah, it
thank
seems
you.
like a lot of booktubers actually do have a writing hobby or a desire to get published. And there's like, it's like half and half, where half are like me, where I have zero desire to ever put pen to paper. I love consuming other people's creativity and stories. And then, yeah, like a lot of people that are on BookTube are also writers as well. And so it's fascinating, just we're all here together. But that's awesome, because I think I've seen so many booktubers with the BookTube platform that's able to launch them into publishing success and have a readership that they just wouldn't be able to build very easily or quickly over time. Absolutely. And so, yeah, I think it's a very, very great move. But you're just, I feel like you're going to be successful on BookTube just for what you bring to BookTube and the freshness and bringing to it something new into fantasy BookTube that we haven't had before. And but no, it's awesome that you're also a writer. I just am in awe of writers in general.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, tell us about that. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, that's right. Well, I've written book 1 of the series, and it's in a really good copy. And I'm drafting books 2, and I'm halfway through drafting book 3 at the moment. And once I've got a full picture of this trilogy, I'm going to go back and do one final draft of book 1 and do some sneaky foreshadowing once I've got an idea of where the whole thing's going.
Yes,
but I'm hoping to self-publish in the next 12 months. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
yeah.
Awesome.
But it was Sanderson who has absolutely inspired me, because he put so much content out there on how to write. And so I'm just always eating it up. So one of the big things is with Mistborn. Mistborn is a massive experiment with genre. And like each trilogy is its own genre, but each individual book is almost like a subgenre. And that's one of the things I like about Sanderson is he knows the rules so well. He knows how to break the rules, right? And so he's, in a lot of ways, he's like a writer's writer. That said, though, I mean, a lot of writers focus a lot on prose, and I'm very much in the minority, but I do not care about prose at all, which is really weird. Like I only care about the story, and whatever gets the information to me as clearly and concisely as possible, I'm for it, right? And so a lot of people say Sanderson's prose is boring. I'm like, look, I kind of get it, but I don't care, you know?
Yeah, it's a story vehicle. It is just purely there to
Yeah.
be as unobtrusive as possible as a story vehicle. And I'm right with you at being a Cosmere fan. Those are some of my favorite series. And Sanderson, between the Mistborn original trilogy and the Stormlight Archive books, they've hit me emotionally more than almost any other fantasy series and any books I've read. So he may not be, exercising the prose muscles as much as some other authors, but he's able to hit me emotionally with his storytelling style and approach in a way that most other authors just haven't for me. And so, yeah, he's also one of my favorites.
Yeah, I think he really blends intellectual writing with emotional writing. And I think that's what a lot of people don't quite get. Like it feels, well, to put it bluntly, it feels smart, but you still get emotionally invested. And I don't think there's as many authors who can do both in an exceptional way. Like some can get just enough emotional writing and then really good, smart, intelligent plots, or one or the other. But it's hard to see someone who can do both in a high level, and that's what I really appreciate about it.
Yeah. Is there anything you can tell us about your fantasy?
Oh, my own stuff. Series? Yeah, well, it's an urban fantasy. And it's it sounds, I love the concept, so cringy, but it's literally about a guy who gets asked by his roommate to chaperone him on a date because he's going on a date with a vampire. Oh. And the guy who is going along with is like, this can't be real, right? This can't be real. But it's all about this secret society of immortal creatures who coexist alongside our own. And it's very, like, the first book's very short and self-contained to the small town. But it quickly expands to being like, by the way, all those rich, powerful families who kind of rule the world, there's always a wizard behind it. And it's
I am in. I'm a huge Dresden Files fan. And
yes,
I love the way that series just opens up and becomes more epic as you go through a bunch of those books. The premise sounds awesome. I can't wait now. I can't wait.
Nice. Yeah, that is exciting. Is it going to be epic fantasy though, or is it more urban fantasy?
More urban, but we're going to push it. We'll see how many books of this I can get out. I'm going to try and stick to 3 for now, but I'd love for it to be a Dresden-esque style where it's like an ongoing series, like 10 or more. But we'll see. I've got plans. I've got a really good plot list. Like, this is ridiculous. Don't do this if you want to write, but I've got like a book 8 plot twist that I'm already thinking about.
That is amazing because you can see, that along the way. Like, I love that when people do that level of thinking ahead and planning, and then that makes rereads also just a tremendous value. And you can see plot twists and things being seeded many books before. I live for that stuff in my log series.
Same.
So you're both Dresden Files fans as well?
Mega fan, yeah. I've reread that series. It's one of my favorites. I just I devoured them, the first time through, and then enjoyed them just as much on a reread. Yeah, it's painful for me that like we have to wait, like a year or two between each book now because I just need to continue with that.
Yeah, I think I'm on my 3rd read through. It's a comfort series at this point. It's just it's relaxing to read,
Oh,
and
wow. I haven't read it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay. Well, each book is very succinct and very self-contained, and yet it does weave through ideas of bigger plot lines. So that's one of the things that makes it an advantage to read. Like if I'm in the middle of a high fantasy series and I just need a short 400-page break Dresden's perfect to just pop in another one. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. And it looks here that Dan, it looks like you're getting questions answered for you here.
Oh,
that
that's
you don't
my
have
wife.
A Twitter. Yeah. Hi, Kit. Nice to see you. I saw her pop up in one of your last videos. Yeah. So
She just shouted "Hey" from the other room. She keeps asking me to appear on my videos, and I'm like, start your own YouTube channel.
I personally, as a viewer, love it when spouses pop into people's videos.
Don't encourage her.
I totally am.
No, she's actually pretty big on Instagram. Oh,
I'm giving the people what they want.
Come say hi.
Hello.
Nice to see you. I think I'm following you on Instagram because I did find the shop. And I
Oh
was
my
like,
goodness.
this is really cute. I'm gonna follow their shop. Yeah.
Yes, no, she's
Really
much
cute
more
merch.
Insta famous than I am, actually.
Oh,
So
nice. Yeah.
well, she's a
Twitter
graphic designer,
also though.
and she
Twitter,
designed the shirt. Actually,
I
We're
love
never
that.
too old for dragons.
Oh my
Oh.
goodness, I love it. That's
Yeah,
incredible.
she does heaps of really good stuff. She's amazing.
That is incredible. Yeah, Twitter, by the way, is a pretty good platform too. I know a whole bunch of self-published authors are on that platform as well as Instagram, but I think more Twitter these days. But
And
yeah, no,
Discord.
I think you're absolutely right on about that having a platform is the way to go as a self-published author. That's going to be so valuable to you to have the channel and to show yourself as an appreciator of the genre as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well,
are there
I'll
any
have to get around to that.
Are there any self-published books that you've gotten into in recent years, Kronk?
Oh, a couple. Well, that's the thing. So it's that is a big gap in my reading area. Is like I have not read enough indie authors, particularly because I'm probably going to be one soon. So I am reading the Cradle series at the moment by Will White, I think it is.
Yeah.
And I'm reading Michael R. Miller at the moment. So he's a Scottish guy actually, and he does a lot of books with dragons. And the best way to describe it is like Aragon but good, right?
I haven't read
so one of these
Aragon, but yeah.
I love
Well, one of the things that's
dragons.
really
I love
fascinating
dragons
is-
and would have enjoyed a better Aragon. So yeah, I'm gonna check out Michael R. Miller.
Yeah, no. One of the things I really like about him is that even though it is, almost a typical high fantasy thing, and like in his first trilogy, you're fighting demons, right? And I was like, oh no, demons! Demons are a boring villain, right? They're kind of nothing. But it's not about the demons; it's about the humans, right? It's about the people, and everyone's think, oh, I can use this war with the demons for my own advantage. And I was like, we got to unite humanity. It's like a zombie story where the zombies aren't the threat; it's the other survivors that are the threat.
Oh, weird. Interesting.
Right? Yeah. I mean, zombies aren't a villain. Zombies are a force of nature in a story. You don't fight zombies the way you fight. It's like fighting an earthquake or a hurricane, and in that sense, demons are similar. But what I found in Miller's work is that he has such nuance of morality, even in a fantasy setting that you're used to it being black and white, but it's very gray and very well executed. And it was very surprising reading his books and being like, I was not expecting such uncertainty between who the heroes and villains are. So many blurring lines. It was
Oh my
very
god,
well
you've
done.
sold me. I just put it on the TBR.
Oh, thanks.
I can't wait to try it. The problem in general with being a reader is that we have a finite number of years to go. We don't even know how long. Finite number of books we can read, and so like we have to make hard choices about what we pick up. And there's just so much now in just like English language, fantasy, and science fiction coming out. And if you want to catch up on older stuff, like on top of that, there's so many great older things that I want to catch up on. So like, how do I prioritize and figure out what to pick up? There's a million self-pub coming out. And so, I've depended on publishers being kind of filter, for me, like, oh, they've picked up this author, they've edited it. But there have been some trad pub authors and series that just haven't worked for me. And so that is not a filter that is, fail safe kind of thing. And so I'm turning more towards just my booktube people that I follow and know how their tastes align with me, and seeing them pick up books or other friends in this fandom. And like, that's how I found becoming a druid, is just seeing a few other booktube friends and people on Discord just starting to read that and be like, oh, what's that? And so I picked it up and then loved it. And that's recent self-pub. but also like I just got Philip Chase's books, the two Way of Edan books that are out, the Way of Edan and the Prophet of Edan. I haven't read them yet, but I've been watching Philip Chase's channel for years, and so I have an attachment to him as a person, and his appreciation for the genre is so vast that I've seen over the years that it was just obvious to me that I would pick up his books and give them a read. And so yeah, we have to figure out how to prioritize, and so I do it by seeing what other people I know and what they're reading, and it's hard though picking up books that are self-pub that maybe haven't been read by anyone yet. It's like, is this going to be a waste of time for me, or is I want to give new books a try, but I also have so many things to read.
Right.
So it is tough. So we have to have our ways of filtering out our books that we actually want to try.
Yeah, and with indie authors, you never know if they actually paid for an editor to go over it.
Yeah. I know Philip Chase did. He had a developmental editor and an agent, and he has quotes from people like Ian C. Esselmont and Jenny Wirtz and Mark Lawrence quoted on the cover of his book.
Nice.
So yeah, I've enjoyed those 2 books so far. I have a running joke with him because he lovingly called me an assassin elf at one point, and it was kind of like, I thought it was like an endearing thing. I'm like, oh, I'm an assassin elf, okay. And then I read his book, and I found out elves are like demonic, ugly, cruel creatures. And I was like, Philip, how dare you?
Oh no.
I've just teased him like crazy since then. But no, he's wonderful. He's a lovely human being. I think you'd really enjoy his channel. I don't know if you've heard of it, Philip Chase.
I'll add it to the list.
He calls his channel The Best of Fantasy with Philip Chase. And so he's always on the mission to find the best of fantasy. But yeah, I think you would enjoy his channel as well, because it's kind of like a similar channel mission in a way.
Awesome.
There's that. I haven't read them, but Zach Argyle, he wrote a certain series. People can remind me.
Threadlight. Yeah, I just bought into the Kickstarter, even though I haven't read them yet. But I want to try it in the nice edition, so we'll see.
Yeah, I guess there is going to be some very nice editions out there for a Kickstarter. Zach Argyle is married to a YouTuber called Bookborn, who's also got a pretty good has an amazing channel. I'll just say that. She's incredible. But he also is very influenced by Sanderson. So that's why I thought I'd bring it up. I haven't read them, but I know everybody is always comparing it to Sanderson. So might be something to check out.
Well, I might need to take off shortly, but
Yeah.
I did actually want to say something. I didn't answer the why read question.
Yeah, I want. Oh, yes, you need to answer that question.
Yes.
So many reasons, right? But 2 big reasons, and one of them, Joanna, I saw in one of the why read videos, you said one of the reasons you read is for the experience of wonder. And I really appreciated that. I am almost close to that, just adjacent to that. For me, it's curiosity. So a bit of a life philosophy of mine, but I think the opposite of fear is not courage, it's curiosity. Because we fear the unknown, but if we're curious about the unknown instead, we get excited about it and we want to explore and learn and grow. And curiosity is, I see it as a life skill that you have to practice and develop. And one of the experiences I've learned that is through traveling. I know the first couple times I've gone to another country and I'm in a foreign airport and they may not speak English and I'm very nervous and overwhelmed. It is a scary experience. But once you've done it a few times, you start being excited about it. Everything's new and everything is exciting because it's new. And you just want to walk down every alleyway. Well, I do because I'm 6'3", so I don't mind walking down back alleys, right? But the idea of if we are curious, then we're not afraid. And that's what reading does for me. It's like exploring. It makes me excited about what could be new, what new experiences and new ideas could challenge me and help me grow. And that's one of the big reasons I read.
Beautifully
Oh,
said.
that's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Yay.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a beautiful way to end this episode tonight. So I want to
Definitely.
thank you both so much for offering your time. I didn't
thanks for
realize
having us
how much
on.
time had gone by. So I apologize if I've held either of you a little late in the morning or
Oh,
in the evening.
totally fine.
But I really appreciated this conversation immensely. So thank you so much, Ben, and thank you so much, Kronk.
No, thank you both.
Thank
It was
you.
lovely to meet you
Thank you.
both. I had a wonderful time. Thank you.
Yay.
Wonderful to meet you, Kronk, and finally actually talk
Same,
with you in
mate.
person, Joanna, after years of being in comments.
Yes, absolutely. It's wonderful to get to actually chat with you. And everyone in the chat, thank you so much for joining us. If you're not already subscribed to these two wonderful channels,
Thank you.
please subscribe to them. They both have wonderful content. They're both incredibly well read. And again, like I said at the beginning, something I appreciate is that they talk in a way that's very relatable to their audience. And that's something I always appreciate. So I'll leave their links in the description. They should be in the description of the video. And thank you all for participating in the chat, joining us here. It means a lot to me. Thank you so much for supporting the Why Read series. And have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.